Chapter 946. The scent of blood was mixed in the air within the empty large hall, forming clusters of dense blood fog. Numerous corpses were lying in a disorderly manner. The scene appeared extremely horrifying. At this moment, there were still 3 living people in the large hall. One of them was Xiaoyan. Xiaoyan was the first to arrive at this place. At this moment, Xiaoyan's body was as stiff as a statue. One of his feet was lifted into the air and stopped less than 2 inches from the ground. The expression on his face was particularly interesting. The previous solemn expression was no longer present. On the contrary, it was replaced with an extremely shocked expression. His pair of pitch-black eyes were filled with disbelief. It was a long while later before Xiaoyan gradually recovered from the shock that he had been in for a long while. While Xiaoyan was in a daze, the 2 black-robed men behind him did not disturb him. They only took off the loose black robes that covered their faces, revealing their true faces in the hall that was filled with the smell of blood. When Xiaoyan turned around and looked at the 2 people behind him with a surprised gaze, the familiar and amiable smile that was revealed on their faces caused Xiaoyan to feel as though he was dreaming. Both parties stood still on the spot and smiled as they looked at each other for a long time. Finally, Xiaoyan's face was filled with excitement as he heavily cupped his hands toward the old man who had just spoken. He bowed and spoke with a respectful tone, one word at a time. Junior Xiaoyan pays his respects to Elder Luo. At this moment, the blood fog in the air automatically scattered, forming a pure tunnel between the 2 parties. At this moment, Old Luo was similarly looking at Xiaoyan with a smile. His old face was filled with a pleased and satisfied expression. This so-called Elder Luo was naturally Luo Ao, whom he had not seen for many years in Emerald Green City. As for the other young man beside him, he was naturally Xiaoyan's first friend after coming to Yuanwu continent, Luo Jin. Cuckoo, little fellow, it has been many years since we last met. Your achievements have caused the old me to sigh in admiration. Luo Ao smiled and nodded to Xiaoyan as he stepped forward. The powerful fighting strength that Xiaoyan had displayed earlier was something that even he had never heard of. Even in the entire continent, it seemed that there was no one among the younger generation whom he had met who could contend with Xiaoyan. The latter involuntarily smiled awkwardly when he heard this. Immediately, his gaze landed on Luo Jin by the side. Without the obstruction of the black robe, the latter's current cultivation was completely exposed in front of Xiaoyan's eyes. An intermediate 8-star Do-D. This kind of training speed was even more exaggerated than his own. TSK, an intermediate 8-star Do-D. Your training speed is really frightening. Do you want to find time to spar with me? Xiaoyan's eyes revealed an amazed expression. In less than 10 years, he had leaped from a mere bandit to an elite 8-star Do-D. This kind of training speed could really be said to be world-shocking. However, the last sentence of his words caused Luo Jin's entire body to quiver. He hurriedly waved his hand and used his gaze to viciously glare at Luo Jin. He snappily said, "You are purposely mocking me. Although it is true that I am an intermediate 8-star Do-D, I have clearly seen earlier that even the advanced 8-star Do-D, Jian Ming, was unable to endure a punch from you, much less me. I should also mention that you are only an intermediate 6-star Do-D." Ugh! Luo Jin's words caused Xiaoyan and Luo Ao to be speechless. They immediately laughed involuntarily. Luo Jin helplessly shrugged his shoulders. His face was filled with an innocent expression. What he said was indeed correct. With Xiaoyan's fighting strength, he could be considered a kind of heaven-defying existence among all the elite Do-D on the continent. A 6-star Do-D was able to kill an 8-star Do-D. Even a 9-star Do-D had been killed by him. This kind of fighting strength could be said to be frightening. Cuckoo, if I have not guessed wrongly, the reason why you have stayed until the end is because of this. The 3 of them chatted for a while. Immediately, Luo Ao changed the topic and returned to the main topic. The 3 of them turned around and simultaneously looked at the enormous stone statue at the deepest part of the large hall. At this moment, there was no one beside them. Xiaoyan's heart suddenly relaxed. His gaze also became a little more careful when he looked at the stone statue. That's right. My aim for entering the ancient tomb this time around is actually not because of these Doqi inheritances. Instead, you are here to obtain the spiritual source strength of Tianju? Luo Ao raised his eyebrows slightly. He seemed to have heard something from Xiao Yan's words. It seemed that the latter knew that the spiritual source strength of Tianju existed in this ancient tomb from the very beginning. However, all of this was not important. What was important was that these words of Xiao Yan allowed them to keep the Douqi inheritance in a logical manner. In this way, they did not need to care about Xiao Yan's feelings after they obtained the Douqi inheritance. This action of Xiao Yan was purposefully giving up the Douqi inheritance to them. Of course, regardless of whether Xiao Yan was willing to give it up, this would more or less cause Luo Ao and Luo Ao to feel a little apologetic. Hence, the spiritual source strength sealed within the stone statue naturally became a tool to smooth out this layer of apologetic feeling. The three of them arrived in front of the stone statue and cast their gazes on it. Luo Ao glanced at Xiao Yan and gently nodded his head as a sign of acknowledgement. Seeing this, Xiao Yan's thoughts moved. He took out a strand of spiritual source strength from the soul bead and slowly approached the stone statue, after which he poured it into the stone statue through its eyes. Hum hum hum. Immediately, a golden light rapidly rose from the surface of the stone statue and enveloped the entire stone statue. Luo Ao's eyes immediately flashed when he saw this. Surprise flashed across his old face. He could tell that this layer of golden light was a kind of formation. Moreover, its rank did not seem to be low. It had been left behind by Tianju specifically to protect the stone statue. With his extraordinary eyesight and experience, Luo Ao could tell that as long as there was the protection of this special formation, the stone statue would instantly explode if someone tried to forcefully steal the spiritual source strength within the stone statue. At the same time, the enormous spiritual source strength within it would also explode. I didn't expect this old guy to be so careful. It seems that this should be a kind of rank 6 formation. It's just that the method used is not very pure. Luo Ao expressed his opinion as he looked at the layer of golden light on the stone statue. On the other hand, Luo Jin could not help but raise his eyebrows when he heard this. He said in surprise, "A rank 6 formation master? Isn't that the same as you?" "Shut up, brat. If it weren't for the fact that this old man was too lazy to cultivate, how could a dead man from 1,000 years ago compare to me?" As soon as Luo Jin finished speaking, Luo Ao hurriedly shut him up. Then he glanced at the formation in front of him again and said with slight ridicule, "Although it's a rank 6 formation, in this old man's opinion, this Tianju probably just happened to break through to rank 6 before he died." Hearing this, Luo Jin chuckled and glanced at Luo Ao with a mocking look in his eyes. He thought to himself, "Old man, when you broke through to rank 6, you were already an origin king, right? And this guy? He was an early returnance expert and a class 6 formation master. Just this aspect alone was enough to make Luo Ao incomparable to him. If it were not for the fact that the esteemed Tianju had died for no reason, his accomplishments would have been far greater." Translator, Atlas Studios Editor, Atlas Studios. Chapter 947. While Luo Ao and Luo Jin were teasing each other in the outside world, Xiao Yan was currently pouring wave after wave of enormous spiritual strength into the stone statue. At the same time, his consciousness also followed into the stone statue. As his consciousness entered the stone statue, Xiao Yan felt as if he had entered the depths of the ocean. A terrifying pressure ruthlessly squeezed his soul, almost crushing him to pieces. What a terrifying soul pressure! Xiao Yan's heart immediately felt terrified. Such a frightening spiritual pressure was something that he had never felt anywhere else. Xiao Yan did not doubt that his consciousness would definitely be shattered by this enormous spiritual strength, if he were to continue staying in this place for a long time. At the same time that Xiao Yan's spiritual strength was facing an enormous pressure, the expression of his actual body in the outside world had also instantly turned pale. The expression on his face also became distorted. His body trembled repeatedly, appearing as though he was enduring something. This alerted the two people beside him. What's going on with him? Luo Jin frowned. He could not help but worry for Xiao Yan. Seeing this, Luo Ao could not help but frown as well. With a solemn tone he said, "This kid seems to be under the suppression of the soul origin within the stone statue. After all, it's a rank 6 soul strength. It's several times stronger than this kid's. If he stays here for too long, he'll probably be crushed by the soul strength inside. What? Fifth grandfather, hurry up and save him. You can't let anything happen to Xiaoyan. Hearing Luo Ao's words, Luo Jin's expression immediately tensed up. With a thought, his soul strength immediately gushed out, and he was about to step forward. Come back. Just as Luo Jin was about to act, he was pulled back by Luo Ao. At the same time, the soul strength that had gushed out was forcefully withdrawn. You brat, I've never seen you care so much about a girl. Why is it that when it comes to Xiaoyan, you're even more worried about him than he is? Luo Ao pursed his lips and looked at Luo Jin with a strange expression. Soon after, he turned his gaze back to Xiaoyan and said, if he really wants to come out, he can do so at any time. Moreover, I guarantee that he won't be harmed by the soul origin within. But look at him right now. He clearly wants to continue. Since this is his own will, why do we have to forcefully stop him? Is it to prevent him from being injured? Hearing this, Luo Jin frowned as he looked at Xiaoyan, who was turning paler and paler. His heart was filled with hesitation. He could imagine that Xiaoyan must have suffered a lot to obtain his current strength. If he did not pay a price, how could he repay him? The latter was the limit of the pain he could endure. Through repeated attempts and challenges, he broke through the limit again and again, reaping the rewards from the pain and suffering. The battle results that Xiaoyan had established were something that Luo Jin could only hope to catch up to. But if he doesn't come out, don't worry. If anything happens, I'll pull his soul strength out of there at the first moment. You're not the only one who doesn't want anything to happen to him. With such a good seedling, I can't bear to let anything happen to him. If he can continue to grow, this old man believes that one day, this continent will definitely tremble, just like that person back then. Muttering softly, Luo Ao's deep old eyes involuntarily flickered as he recalled a certain legend in his heart. 1,000 years ago, a mysterious man was born on the continent and grew at an extraordinary speed. In less than 100 years, that mysterious man had transformed into the strongest person on the continent. Even the current #1 sect on the continent could not compare to him. When he broke through to the legendary realm, the entire continent would change. No one had ever seen his true appearance, and no one had ever been able to converse with him. The only information they knew about him was that the mysterious man had beautiful long hair of different colors on his head. It was elegant and extraordinary. While Luo Ao was lost in his thoughts, Xiaoyan was still bitterly holding on at this moment. The enormous spiritual pressure made it difficult for him to breathe. Under the suppression of Tianju's spiritual origin energy, the spiritual strength that was constantly pouring in was fiercely compressed together, unable to spread out, let alone refine this spiritual origin energy. Soon, the pain that Xiaoyan's consciousness sensed became increasingly intense. At this moment, Xiaoyan could clearly sense that his spiritual strength was about to be unable to endure any longer. If he did not choose to withdraw at this moment, it was likely that his consciousness would be forcefully shattered by this spiritual essence strength within a couple of minutes. At that time, even if he did not die, he would definitely leave behind a sequela that he could not recover from. In the outside world, seeing that Xiaoyan's face was becoming increasingly pale, Luo Ao finally could not hold it in any longer. He knew that Xiaoyan desperately wanted to obtain the spiritual origin energy within the stone statue. However, based on Xiaoyan's current state, it was destined that he would not be able to extract the spiritual origin energy. Damn it, do I have no choice but to withdraw? Feeling the increasingly powerful spiritual pressure, Xiaoyan unwillingly cursed in his heart. At the same time, in the outside world, Luo Ao was preparing to take action and pull Xiaoyan's spiritual strength and consciousness out of the stone statue. However, it was also at this moment that the storage ring on Xiaoyan's finger suddenly flashed. A jade bottle flew out of it without any forewarning. Soon after, a wave of spiritual strength spread out from the jade bottle. A bang sounded and the palm-sized jade bottle immediately burst apart. After which, Luo Ao and his granddaughter clearly saw a palm-sized cream-white energy cluster emit a swoosh sound as it entered the stone statue. That is, Luo Ao's expression involuntarily froze when he saw the milky white ball of energy. Soon after, he stopped in his tracks. This was because he clearly sensed that after the milky white ball of energy entered the stone statue, the powerful spiritual pressure within it instantly disappeared. At this moment, Xiaoyan's body also suddenly relaxed. The pain that his spiritual strength had to endure also abruptly disappeared. It was as if he had just experienced a huge battle. Inside the stone statue, Xiaoyan finally had the time to properly inspect the space within the stone statue after the pressure was removed. The milky white spiritual strength was like a white fog that drifted in all directions. Apart from a stretch of white, nothing else could be seen. Although he did not know what had happened, Xiaoyan still carefully spread out his spiritual strength and carefully probed the interior of the dense fog. Suddenly, the fog in front of Xiaoyan parted on its own. It agglomerated into a substance-like corridor on both sides, leading the way for Xiaoyan. With curiosity in his heart, Xiaoyan cautiously walked along the corridor. After a few turns, a large ball of fog finally dispersed in front of Xiaoyan's eyes. The figure of an old man in a brocade robe appeared in front of Xiaoyan. Seeing this old man, Xiaoyan's expression was slightly stunned. Immediately after, he compared the old man's appearance with the appearance of the stone statue outside. The instant the two appearances perfectly merged in his heart, Xiaoyan could not help but exclaim. Esteemed Tianju. Mobile version update website. Chapter 948. The moment Xiaoyan exclaimed, the old man, who was standing absent-mindedly in front of him, also seemed to be alarmed. He lifted his eyelids and looked at Xiaoyan. Shoo. Seeing that Xiaoyan could not help but open his mouth once again, the old man helplessly made a shushing gesture to Xiaoyan. Immediately, he turned his gaze back to the space above his palm. A palm-sized cream-white energy cluster was slowly floating in the air. That is, Xiaoyan was shocked when he saw the ball of light. He recognized it at a glance. It was Xiaoxian's soul remnant. But why was it in his hands? What did he want to do? Xiaoyan's face gradually turned gloomy as thoughts flashed through his mind. Don't worry, kid. I'm just curious and surprised. Back then, I spent my entire life trying to find the first scroll of the returnance technique, but I couldn't find it in the end. I didn't expect to encounter it here after being dead for nearly 1,000 years. Haha, it's really fate. As if sensing the change in Xiaoyan's emotions, the old man shook his head and sighed bitterly. He stared at the ball of Xiaoxian's soul remnant above his palm with a regretful expression. Xiaoyan calmed down a little after hearing the old man's words. However, his eyes were still filled with caution when he looked at the old man. Although this fellow had been dead for nearly 1,000 years, just by relying on this enormous spiritual strength, it was likely that Xiaoyan would not have much ability to resist if Tianju wanted to do anything to him. Therefore, in order to be safe, Xiaoyan had no choice but to be cautious. I can see that he seems to be very important to you. The old man didn't pay too much attention to Xiaoyan's emotional changes. At the same time, he extended his palm, and the ball of light above his palm slowly floated toward Xiaoyan. Xiaoyan caught it carefully in a hurry. Only after confirming that the old man had not done anything to it did he let out a sigh of relief inside. Don't worry, I don't have any thoughts about him. I'm a person from 1,000 years ago after all. Even if I was reborn now, there's nothing for me to fight over. Not to mention, I've lived enough. The reason why I risked my life to break through to returnance was because I wanted to know if the returnance technique had a way to break through. Unfortunately, I seem to have proven that it doesn't. The old man shrugged helplessly when he reached the end of his sentence. He was self-deprecating. Xiaoyan remained silent in this regard because this point was very easy to understand. The returnance technique could allow him to progress smoothly on the path of cultivation, allowing him to become a supreme expert in just 100 years. However, everything had its pros and cons. There were 2 cons to the returnance technique. One was the 3 barriers that were the hardest to surmount, and the other was that the returnance technique was split into 3 scrolls. If he could not cultivate the 3 scrolls separately, he would not be able to become a true expert. In other words, the outcome of the esteemed Tianju was understandable. Of course, he had already considered this possibility in the past. However, for the sake of pursuing the path of the strong, he would not hesitate even if he had to give up his life. On this point, Xiaoyan shared the same feeling. Suddenly, the old man and the young man raised their heads at the same time and stared at each other. Ha 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 ha. A few seconds later, laughter rang out. The two of them had a tacit understanding. Although they were not from the same era, they were the same kind of people. If it were not for the teasing of time, they probably would have become good friends despite their age difference. The little guy's pretty good. You've come here to save him, right? Tianju did not hesitate and went straight to the point. At this moment, Xiaoyan had also let down his guard against the old man. He smiled and nodded. He took a step forward and cupped his hands respectfully towards Tianju. The revival of my ancestor requires the support of the soul source energy. Therefore, I implore Senior to save my ancestor. Once his voice sounded, Xiaoyan's bent waist became even deeper. The expression on his face was also filled with respect. Hee, this old man is now just a remnant soul, and I won't be able to survive for much longer. Furthermore, since your ancestor has also cultivated the returnance technique, it can be said that we are of the same origin. Furthermore, this old man purposely left behind the power of this soul origin in order to give it to a fated person. If my soul origin can really revive your ancestor, this might not be a bad thing. Furthermore, at the end of his words, the old man fell silent. Xiaoyan did not feel anything strange. Immediately after, Xiaoxian's remnant soul in his arms flew forward uncontrollably and returned to the old man's hands. The old man formed a seal with his hands, and the milky white mist in the surroundings seemed to have received some kind of command, and quickly gathered towards the milky white energy ball between his hands. Seeing this scene, Xiaoyan's expression changed slightly, and he hurriedly said, "Senior, my ancestor's remnant soul is too weak now. If you use this method of direct fusion, I'm afraid. Don't worry, if you forcibly fuse with him, you may need to consider this point, but I'm giving him my soul source energy on my own initiative. Under my control, my soul source energy will not have any backlash. As for your ancestor, with his current weak state, I believe he won't resist my fusion. In this way, not only will the fusion speed be faster, but the soul source energy he obtains will also be more complete. This is only beneficial for your ancestor." Esteemed Tianju smiled. At the same time, a huge amount of soul energy poured into Xiaoxian's remnant soul. Sure enough, as he had said, the fusion process of the soul source energy was particularly smooth. It was even faster than when Xiaoyan helped to refine it in the past. Perhaps this was because the two of them cultivated the same cultivation method. In any case, with the support of esteemed Tianju's soul source energy, Xiaoxian's chances of recovery would be greater. Thinking of this, Xiaoyan could not help but feel a little excited. After so many years, if he saw Xiaoxian's ancestor again, what kind of atmosphere would it be? Inside the stone statue, a huge amount of soul energy was fusing with Xiaoxian's remnant soul at a speed visible to the naked eye. In order not to affect it, Xiaoyan consciously withdrew. He believed that with esteemed Tianju personally controlling it, nothing would happen to Xiaoxian. In the outside world, seeing Xiaoyan open his eyes, Luo Ao could not help but frown slightly. Luo Jin also looked at Xiaoyan. Is the absorption complete? Luo Ao frowned. He did not feel any change in Xiaoyan's soul energy. Xiaoyan merely smiled and shook his head when he heard this. He lifted his gaze and looked at the stone statue in front of him. He was just about to open his mouth when a powerful energy storm suddenly swept over from outside of the large hall. With just one strike, it shattered the outer wall of the large hall. Numerous densely packed crack lines swiftly covered the wall. Soon after, the powerful energy storm completely destroyed the entire wall in front of Xiaoyan's shocked eyes. Translator, M. Editor, M. Chapter 949. The powerful energy powder storm instantly destroyed the outer walls of the large hall. Even the formation that was connected to the entire ancient tomb was destroyed along with it. The sudden appearance of this scene not only caused Xiaoyan, but also Luo Ao and Luo Jin by the side to be startled for an instant. What happened? The three of them swiftly exchanged glances. Their bodies immediately moved as they flew forward. They flew past the ruins in front of them, and arrived in front of the large hall. Xiaoyan involuntarily turned his head to look at the stone statue in the depths of the large hall. After confirming that there was no mistake, he looked to the front with a solemn face. The murderous intent in his eyes was sharp. The three of them swept their gazes over. Only after observing for a while did they notice that a large group of black figures was swiftly flashing in front of the three of them. Battle cries were transmitted into the ears of the three of them from afar. From the looks of it, someone self-destructed just now. Luo Ao narrowed his eyes and spoke in an unconcerned manner when he saw this scene. At this moment, Xiao Yan's eyes were staring intently at the group of human figures. His gaze stared at the front of the group. Those people seemed to belong to the same group. The people behind them were chasing after this small group that had only a few people left. The small group was in a panic and did not know where to go. It seemed that they had no choice but to flee here. However, Xiaoyan was not concerned about the direction in which this group of people was fleeing. Instead, he was concerned about the identity of this group of people. When the group of people gradually approached, their line of sight became increasingly clear. Finally, Xiaoyan was able to clearly see the group of people. The remaining 4 people were all wearing white robes. From the style of their white robes, one could tell at a glance that they belonged to the same faction. At this moment, 3 of the 4 people had the appearance of old men. Only a young man was crazily fleeing under the protection of these 3 people. This group of 4 was Morong Xian's group. The Douqi inheritance on their bodies had been discovered by others. This was why they had been crazily chased by this group of people. After a big battle, a portion of the group had died due to their inability to fight. Another portion had chosen to self-destruct in order to protect Morong Xian. It was because of this that they were able to delay the group behind them until now. Unfortunately, with the development of the situation, the people behind him quickly caught up to him again. This old man wants to see how many more times you can self-destruct. A linen-robed old man in the group wore a ferocious smile on his face. He ordered the surrounding elite Dodi to wildly chase after the 4 people in front. This person was undoubtedly Yi Luotian. The distance between the 2 sides was getting closer and closer. The attacks from behind were also constantly exploding on the ground behind the 4 of them. If the 4 of them were to slow down even a little, they would be bombarded by the rain of attacks. Damn it! They're trying to kill us all. Morong Xian couldn't help but reveal a trace of despair on his face. As he felt the attacks coming closer and closer behind him, his heart had already sunk to the bottom of the valley. If handing over the Douqi inheritance was enough, they would have left this place a long time ago. However, in the end they realized that not only did this group of people want to obtain the Douqi inheritance, they also wanted to kill everyone in this ancient tomb. They had no intention of letting anyone go. Young master, don't worry. This subordinate will definitely rescue you even if I have to risk my old life. You must not despair. The white-haired old man by the side continued to encourage Morong Xian. No matter what, he would not let anything happen to Morong Xian. If anything happened to the latter, he would not be able to rest in peace even if he died. Uncle Quan, let's go together. Morong Xian clenched his teeth. He was just about to grab the old man's wrist when the old man was 1 step ahead. He suddenly grabbed Morong Xian's wrist, and a powerful force immediately gathered on his arm. He violently flung Morong Xian away. Soon after, Douqi gushed out from his palm, and turned into a fierce gust of wind that violently pushed the 3 people beside him away. As for himself, he was already exposed to the attacks of the group behind him. Ha 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 ha. A group of trash. Come, let this old man meet you. A wild laugh was emitted from the old man's mouth as he turned around. At the same time, the Douqi within his body became wild and violent. Soon after, the old man's body suddenly exploded when the group of people behind him arrived. Bang! An earth-shaking energy wave swept out in all directions. Wherever it passed, the city below was completely destroyed. At the same time, it also exposed the numerous mysterious symbols under the surface of the ground. This is, in front of the ruins of the large hall, Luo Ao and Luo Jin's expressions changed slightly when they saw this scene. Only then did they understand in their hearts why such a useless city would be built in this enormous ancient tomb. This was not some hobby of Tianju. He was merely using it to cover up the entire formation below. I'm afraid that this great array is not weak even among the rank 6 arrays. Luo Ao's eyes hardened. There was a faint premonition in his heart. Uncle Quan. Morong Xian's heart was incomparably furious as he watched the old man who had accompanied him for many years die with his own eyes. He had never imagined that there would be such a day between him and Morong Quan. Old Quan, have you really died just like that? The other old man by the side could not help but sigh. Tears involuntarily surged from his eyes. An old man was full of emotions. Moreover, this was a good brother who had accompanied him for his entire life. At this moment, the originally beating heart of this old man seemed to have suddenly stopped. The anger on his old face had also mostly disappeared in the blink of an eye. Ha! I want all of you to die. Morong Xian's mouth suddenly emitted a hoarse and furious cry. At the same time his body moved. He ignored the people around him, and actually charged toward the group of people who had once again chased after him. Young master! The hearts of the remaining two old men were immediately startled. They hurriedly moved and tried to give chase. However, in front of Morong Xian's great way of the wind, their speed could not compare. In the blink of an eye, Morong Xian's figure had once again appeared within the attacking range of that group of people. At this moment, even the hearts of these elite Dodi could not help but be slightly moved. How many people in the entire continent could do this for their subordinates? At this moment, even they could not help but feel some pity for Morong Xian in front of them. Huh? However, if they pitied others, who would pity them? Now, even their own lives were in the hands of Yi Luotian. If they did not obey his will, they would die. When it came to the latter, there was only fear in their hearts. Of course, this was also Yi Luotian's goal. He did not need true loyalty. He did not trust anyone. In his eyes, the relationship between the living things on this continent was only one of using and being used. Unfortunately, he was the one who used them. Very quickly, under the sorrowful and furious gazes of the two elite Dodi from the Morong clan, a dense raindrop like bombardment ruthlessly landed on Morong Xian's body. Boom! After a series of explosions, the wind and dust scattered. Everyone focused their eyes and looked over. There was nothing at the spot where Morong Xian had been standing. What? Just as Yi Luotian's heart was slightly alarmed, two figures appeared in front of him, one after the other. One of them was Morong Xian. The other person was the one who had instantly caused Yi Luotian's expression to darken. Xiaoyan. Mobile version update website. Chapter 950. On the ground, Peng Lu's complexion was deathly pale. Her heart was filled with fear as she raised her head to look at the black-robed figure that was faintly floating in the air. Cold sweat unceasingly flowed down from her forehead, and soon her clothes were drenched. You, who are you? The person who will kill you. Without any superfluous words, Xiaoyan extended his hand and flipped it towards Peng Lu. Almost at the same time, a powerful force came crashing down on Peng Lu's head. Before she could let out a shriek, Peng Lu's body and soul were instantly crushed, turning into a bloody mist that slowly dissipated. The instant this scene appeared, the young girl beside Xiaoyan covered her pretty little face in fright. Her delicate face was filled with shock. As for Zhu Chang and the others behind her, they were so shocked that their mouths were wide open. Their dumbfounded expressions appeared rather comical. Only after that did Xiaoyan nonchalantly turn around. Seeing those shocked gazes, he was already used to it. He helplessly shrugged his shoulders, turned his head to the young girl beside him, and said with a smile, "Is this all right?" Only after hearing Xiaoyan's words did the young girl timidly remove her pair of lily-white hands that were covering her face. She timidly looked at the former, then hurriedly turned her gaze away. At the same time, her little head nodded like a little chick pecking at rice. It could be considered a response. Seeing this, Xiaoyan casually smiled. Then he turned his gaze and looked at those 9-star half-martial emperors. His expression abruptly turned cold, and with an indifferent tone he said, "Scram. Go back and tell your master that not a single person here is allowed to touch them. Otherwise you will end up like him." Xiaoyan's cold cry caused the few 9-star half-emperors to be so frightened that they fell to the ground on their butts. Only after Xiaoyan's words sounded did these fellows hurriedly flee in panic, using their fastest speed to leave this place. Junior Zhu Chang thanks Senior for saving my life. At the moment when Xiaoyan turned around, Zhu Chang and the villagers behind him all knelt down and respectfully bowed to Xiaoyan. This, my daughter Kair, would also like to thank Senior for saving her brother. Just as Xiaoyan was about to open his mouth, the young girl beside him also quickly knelt on the ground, her pretty face filled with gratitude. Xiao Yan waved his sleeves and an invisible strength spread out, lifting up the kneeling crowd in front of him. Everyone felt even more shocked in their hearts when they saw this scene. At the same time that they stood up, the respect in their eyes when they looked at Xiao Yan became even denser. Thank you, Senior. There's no need to say such things. I was asked to do so by someone. That's why I took action. After casually glancing at Zhu Chang, Xiao Yan turned and looked at the young girl. His pitch-black eyes stared at the colorful eyes of the young girl, and he couldn't help but click his tongue in amazement. If esteemed Tianju's request was one of the reasons why he stayed, then the young girl in front of him was another reason why he was still standing there at this moment. Seeing that Xiao Yan's gaze had actually landed on Zhu Chang's face couldn't help but change slightly. He took 2 steps forward, cupped his hands at Xiao Yan, and pulled the young girl behind him. Regardless of whether you were asked to do so by someone or not, since you have saved our village, I would like to be bold and invite you to the village. I hope you can agree. Haha, little guy. It seems that this kid thinks you're a pervert. Suddenly, Xiao Xian's teasing laughter sounded from Xiao Yan's body. It was really difficult for anyone not to notice such an obvious scene. As Xiao Xian was currently in a soul state, his body was rather weak. As a result, he entered Xiao Yan's body and used Xiao Yan's heavenly flame to nourish himself, while sorting out the power of inheritance contained in esteemed Tianju's soul origin. Hearing that, Xiao Yan could only helplessly smile bitterly. His expression didn't change as he nodded at Zhu Chang. Afterwards, he followed Zhu Chang into the village. Along the way, Zhu Chang led the way for Xiao Yan, while the others obediently followed behind. From time to time, their voices would be filled with joy and worry. Now that Pang Lu was dead, they were temporarily safe. However, Pang Lu's death did not bring them long-term peace. On the contrary, Zhu village would soon face an even greater threat. Pang Lu is dead, but what about the taxes from above? In the past, we might be able to take out 100 spiritual stones. However, in recent years the taxes from above have been very high, and the output of the spiritual vein has been decreasing. Gathering 100 spiritual stones every month is already a huge pressure on us. I didn't expect them to be so excessive this time. It has been less than half a month since the last tax payment, and they actually came to rush us again. They are really forcing us into a dead end. Yes, the spiritual veins have been very strange recently. Although spiritual stones can be seen everywhere, it is difficult to mine a single piece even after using all our manpower and resources. This is the first time this has happened in so many years. Moreover, this time, even Kai was unable to do anything. This is really making people nervous. Xiao Yan, who was walking slowly, suddenly heard the words coming from behind him. He couldn't help but stop slightly. He frowned slightly and turned around to look at the 2 old men who were talking. The bodies of the 2 old men paused when they saw Xiao Yan's gaze being shot over. The expressions on their old faces were initially startled. Soon after, they hurriedly bowed to Xiao Yan, afraid that they would slight the other party. You just said that the spiritual vein is a mountain range that produces spiritual stones. Xiao Yan raised his hand and helped the 2 old men, who were bowing to him, up as he curiously inquired. The 2 old men's expressions paused. They looked at each other and nodded, saying, Senior is right. Senior is right. The spirit vein that we are talking about is the mountain range that produces spirit stones. You just said that spiritual stones can be seen everywhere in the spiritual vein, but can't be mined, right? Xiao Yan nodded and said again. Yes. Could it be that Senior knows the reason? Hearing Xiao Yan's question, the 2 old men's eyes revealed a hint of joy. They hurriedly asked. Perhaps. If it's really as I think, then perhaps I have a way to solve this problem. Of course, first I have to see the spiritual vein. Xiao Yan smiled slightly. The joy in his heart could not be suppressed. If it was really as he thought, then he had to go to the spiritual vein. I'm sorry, Senior. The spiritual vein concerns the lives of our entire village. If something happens, everyone in our village will be implicated. So, brother, now is not the time to talk about these rules. If we can't take out 100 spiritual stones, the Northern Wasteland Palace will definitely send people here. At that time, we will end up in the same situation. Instead of that, why don't we give it a try? Let Senior take a look. Perhaps he can help us get through this crisis safely. Just as Zhu Chong was about to speak, Kai, who was beside him, interrupted. She looked at Xiaoyan expectantly. Yes. Senior's cultivation is powerful. He will definitely be able to help us get through this crisis. Yes, he is willing to take the initiative to help us. This is already a great gift. We can't just reject him like this. Since we won't have a good ending if we can't hand over the spiritual stones, why don't we give it a try? When the time comes, as long as we hand over the spiritual stones, Peng Lu's death can be considered as an explanation. Yes. Hearing Kai Er's words, before Zhu Chong could do anything, the villagers behind him spoke one after another. The crowd leaned toward Xiaoyan, and Zhu Chong was isolated. With an awkward expression on his face, Zhu Chong's gaze swiftly swept across the group of villagers before landing on Kai Er. Seeing the hopeful smile on Kai Er's face, Zhu Chong finally looked at Xiaoyan. He respectfully cupped his hands together and said with an awkward smile, "In that case, I'll have to trouble Senior." Chapter 951. The powerful spiritual technique storm wildly raged. An incomparable pressure instantly descended on everyone's heads. In an instant, everyone present, with the exception of Luo Ao and Xiaoyan, had landed on the ground. Their faces were flushed red as a great storm once again rose within their hearts. What's going on? Rank 5 spiritual force. Who's there? Come out. Luo Ao's sharp eyes instantly turned towards the depths of the old tomb when he sensed the enormous spiritual strength. There was an extremely powerful spiritual strength there, boiling like a flame. Its powerful aura caused most of the people present to involuntarily feel fear. At this moment, Xiaoyan's face was filled with excitement as he looked at the deep regions of the ancient tomb where the spiritual strength was being emitted. At this moment, he could sense a dense life force being emitted from within. It was just like a newborn baby or a wild lion that had just awoken from its deep slumber. And this life force belonged to Xiao Xian. Ancestor Elder Xian Xiao. Xiaoyan's voice trembled as he muttered. He completely ignored the spiritual storm that was about to strike over. His body flashed and the sky extinction step was unleashed to its limit in an instant. He faced the frightening spiritual pressure head-on and charged in. Xiaoyan, don't. Come back quickly. A powerful pressure uncontrollably spread. When Luo Jin and Luo Ao saw that Xiaoyan had actually retreated instead of advancing, astonishment appeared on their faces. However, Luo Ao did not dare to let Xiaoyan take the risk alone since they did not know the other party's identity. With a wave of his sleeve, the powerful spiritual force belonging to a rank 6 array master immediately surged out, transforming into an invisible hand that attempted to bring Xiaoyan back. The invisible hand rapidly approached Xiaoyan. In the blink of an eye, it had already arrived behind Xiaoyan and was about to grab him. However, at this moment, soul condensing finger. A clear shout rang out from the depths of the ancient tomb as powerful spiritual force immediately condensed. In the blink of an eye, it had condensed into a seemingly solid finger. As the finger descended, it actually forcefully blocked Luo Ao's spiritual force. Boom! With a dull thud, the finger that had materialized suddenly shattered. At the same time, Luo Ao's invisible palm was forcefully pushed back. Damn it, what a powerful soul skill. But even so, you can forget about harming him. With his attack defeated, Luo Ao's expression immediately changed. Just as he was about to attack again, Xiaoyan's shout suddenly rang out. Senior, please don't do anything. He won't hurt me. When he attacked just now, he mistakenly thought that Senior wanted to hurt me. Senior, please withdraw your soul power. Luo Ao could not help but frown slightly when he heard this. It was not difficult for him to detect a sliver of excitement in Xiaoyan's voice. It was as if he was pleasantly surprised by the appearance of this mysterious figure. Could it be that before? Luo Ao was after all an old monster who had lived for many years. After a lightning-like thought in his heart, he immediately associated it with the cluster of cream-white energy light from earlier. Luo Ao only relaxed slightly when he thought of this. When he turned his gaze around, the group of elite Dodi behind him, including the masked person from the ghost hall, took the opportunity to wildly flee out of the ancient tomb. Only Morongxian and the other two were still standing in the same spot. They watched Xiaoyan charge into the ruins that were filled with dust. Their faces were filled with shock and deep gratitude. If Xiaoyan had not intervened today, the few of them, master and servants, would have definitely died in this place. Although Murongquan was already dead, he Murongxian had already remembered this grudge in his heart. All he needed to do was wait for the future to teach them a lesson. At the same time, Xiaoyan had already passed through the permeating dust fog, and once again arrived in front of the stone statue. This stone statue strangely did not collapse after a couple of energy attacks. Instead, everything around it had been destroyed until it was beyond recognition. However, Xiaoyan did not have the mood to observe this at this moment. At this very moment, his pair of dark black eyes were filled with excitement and tears as they stared at the somewhat illusionary human figure standing in the empty space in front of him. The human figure was wearing a pale green long robe. His figure was tall and straight, and his face was handsome. A pair of dark black ink-like eyes were like bottomless black holes. It was as though they had absorbed everything within them. The depth contained an endless wisdom, causing one to involuntarily feel admiration when seeing it. Descendant Xiaoyan respectfully welcomes ancestor Xiaoxian. Xiaoyan could no longer hold back his tears as he arrived before Xiaoxian. His body trembled as he prostrated himself on the ground and bowed to the human figure before him. Xiaoxian's face finally revealed a gratified smile as he looked at Xiaoyan in front of him. His body descended, and he extended his hand to help Xiaoyan up from the ground. At the same time, he opened his mouth and laughed. He smiled and said, "Looks like you've done it." He was referring to Xiaoyan's breakthrough to the half-emperor level. Xiaoyan stood up and wiped away the tears of excitement on his face. Only then did he reveal an embarrassed smile. "I was only lucky enough to break through thanks to ancestors' grace." "Haha, you don't need to be so humble. What I did for you was only one-sided. You still relied on yourself to break through in the end." The two of them smiled at each other. Then Xiaoxian turned his gaze and looked at the stone statue behind him. He could not help but reveal some gratitude on his handsome face. "Thank you for your inheritance, senior." Xiaoxian cupped his hands and bowed to the stone statue. Xiaoyan hurriedly followed behind him. Xiaoxian had already awakened when Tianju infused his soul source energy into him. However, he was too weak at that time and could not make a sound. However, he was very grateful for Tianju's actions. Crack, crack, crack. However, just as the two of them stood up, they suddenly discovered that cracks were spreading rapidly on Tianju's stone statue. As the cracks spread, dazzling golden light shot out from within. In just a few breaths' time, the cracks had spread rapidly. In the blink of an eye, they had already covered the entire hall. At the same time, the same scene was happening in the city outside the hall. Luo Ao's expression changed. He pulled Luo Jin up and quickly looked into the depths of the ancient tomb. Xiaoyan had not come out yet. Damn it, the tomb is about to collapse. Tianju's formation must have been triggered. We must leave this place as soon as possible. But Xiaoyan is still inside. We must bring him out. Luo Jin frowned. He could not let go of Xiaoyan. You stay here and wait for me to return. Luo Ao was well aware of the current situation. Once the formation formed by a rank 6 formation master was activated, even he had to be careful. Moreover, Xiaoyan was still inside. He had no choice but to personally take action. However, boom. Just as Luo Ao was about to move, the surrounding space suddenly collapsed. Endless spatial turbulence swiftly moved like numerous poisonous snakes. Even someone as strong as a 9-star Dodi would have difficulty escaping under this turbulence. Luo Ao was not afraid. He waved his sleeve and a huge Doqi wave immediately swept out, easily breaking the turbulence that was coming at him. However, just as the turbulence was about to be completely destroyed, a huge beast claw suddenly extended from the empty space and tore Luo Ao's attack apart. Mobile version update website. Chapter 952. The illusory spirit pupil was one of the few special pupils that Xiaoyan knew of in the mainland. Before this, the one that Xiaoyan had seen was Qinglin back then. The pair of eyes with the green flower pupils was still deeply etched in his memory. The triple jade green snake flower pupils could forcefully control any snake-type magical beast of the same level or below. The amount of control was determined by the user's cultivation base and combat power. After control, the user could gradually devour and absorb the latter's cultivation base for their own use. It could be said to be the nemesis of all snake-type magical beasts. Back then, Qinglin stirred up the entire 9-abyss deep-ground python because of this. This time, the illusory spirit pupil that Kai possessed was another special pupil with a different effect. Just like what was happening to Kai now, the illusory spirit pupil could devour any energy in the world that was not controlled by humans and absorb it without any difficulty. It even skipped the process of refining it directly. Cultivation could be said to be abnormally simple. As long as one had the illusory spirit pupil, even if one did not deliberately cultivate it, one's cultivation speed would be several times faster than ordinary people. It could be said to be a natural cultivation accelerator. Unfortunately, looking at Kai now, it seemed that she did not know how to use the illusory spirit pupil. According to what the two old men said earlier, when they were mining spiritual stones in the past, as long as Kai was present, the mining speed would be twice the result with half the effort. This was because of the illusory spirit pupil's ability to absorb energy. Of course, the reason why it was so difficult to mine now should be because of what Xiaoyan thought in his heart. Although the illusory spirit pupil was a great tool that could help in cultivation, at the same time, it also had a fatal flaw. At the same time, it was also an incomparable advantage. It could directly devour and absorb the energy of heaven and earth. This made the owner of the illusory spirit pupil an unparalleled cultivation genius in the world. At the same time, it also made it a walking spiritual stone, in the eyes of many cultivators. The illusory spirit pupil could allow the owner to directly absorb the energy of heaven and earth without any difficulty. At the same time, the illusory spirit pupil could also use an extreme method to perfectly graft the owner's cultivation base onto another person. There were two methods of grafting. First, it would be delivered at a slow speed. Of course, although the process was slow, the power obtained would be much more than the usual cultivation. After the delivery process was completely over, the illusory spirit pupil would be completely useless, and it would no longer have any abilities. At the same time, the owner would also be permanently blinded, and their cultivation would also vanish at the same time. As for the other method, it was to change pupils. At the same time as changing pupils, in the shortest amount of time, one's own cultivation would be grafted onto another person's body, creating an expert in the shortest amount of time. As for the person who originally possessed the illusory spirit eyes, they would be crippled and their cultivation would be destroyed. In the worst-case scenario, they would not be able to keep their life and would be in a miserable state. However, it was a pity that Kai was unable to use her special pupils. If this continued, a cultivation genius like her would likely be destroyed in this tiny village. Very quickly, under Zhu Chang's lead, the group of 5 passed through the cave and arrived at the deepest part of the cave. Along the way, Xiao Yan and the rest saw quite a number of villagers. They were waving special tools and pouring douqi into them as they repeatedly knocked on the walls of the cave on both sides. Occasionally, they could see spiritual stones that were exposed from within. Unfortunately, no one was able to successfully remove those spiritual stones from the walls. As they approached the deeper parts of the cave, there was a stuffy hot aura in the air. With the exception of Xiao Yan, everyone present already appeared to be dripping with perspiration. Perspiration soaked their clothes. The surrounding villagers that they met were all topless as they worked hard to extract the spiritual stones. The deeper they went, the stronger the cultivation of the villagers. Perhaps they were worried that those fellows outside would not be able to withstand the high temperature and stuffy heat. Turning his eyes, Xiaoyan randomly glanced at Kai, behind him. However, he suddenly realized that at this moment, the young lady was wearing a red dress that was drenched in perspiration, tightly wrapping around her exquisite and lovely body. Her alluring figure was also fully displayed at this moment. This caused Xiaoyan to feel somewhat embarrassed as he hurriedly turned his gaze away. He subconsciously rubbed his nose and swiftly followed. The closer they got to the deepest part of the cave, the higher the temperature in the air. At the same time, Xiaoyan could also feel that in the deepest part of the cave, there was an extremely vigorous aura. This kind of energy was both pure and enormous. It was simply not something that any spiritual stones could compare to. And this also confirmed Xiaoyan's thoughts. Soon, the group arrived at the deepest part of the cave. At this time, the two old men had already stopped in the distance. The high temperature here was already unbearable for them. Zhu Chang's face was also red as he bitterly endured. Sweat constantly poured out from his body. Even though he had already taken off his clothes and used his douqi, he was still unable to completely withstand the high temperature here. As for Kai, although the young lady relied on her superhuman willpower to endure, she was already tottering as if she could faint at any time. Wang. With a wave of his big sleeve, an invisible force immediately spread out and easily separated the terrifyingly high temperature surrounding the three of them. Soon after, Xiaoyan raised his gaze and looked at the end of the tunnel in front of him. Although this was the deepest part of the cave, the spiritual stones that could be seen everywhere emitted a gentle light, illuminating the entire cave as if it was daytime. At this moment, in front of Xiaoyan and the other two, there was a vast expanse of soft white light. Narrowing his eyes, Xiaoyan's gaze passed through this layer of white light and looked at the protruding milky white spiritual stones behind it. With Xiaoyan's eyesight, he could naturally see that these spiritual stones were all middle-rank spiritual stones without a doubt. In fact, Xiaoyan could even feel that in the depths of these spiritual stones, there was an even more enormous energy. This kind of energy belonged to a high-rank spiritual stone. High-rank spiritual stone. As expected, this spiritual vein really does have high-rank spiritual stones. A glint flickered in Xiaoyan's eyes. His heart contained a joy that could not be suppressed. High-rank spiritual stone. If he was able to obtain one, it would undoubtedly be of great help to his cultivation. Moreover, the strength of his 9 incarnations was currently stagnant. If he was able to obtain the help of a high-rank spiritual stone, Xiaoyan was confident that he would be able to raise his strength to the advanced level of a 5-star Dodi. In this way, it would be quite a great help to Xiaoyan. Sir, may I know if you have any ideas about this? The surrounding temperature suddenly fell. The pressure on Zhu Chang and Kai's bodies was also greatly reduced. 2 pairs of eyes landed on Xiaoyan's body. Their eyes revealed an expression of anticipation. Hearing this, Xiaoyan smiled slightly and said, "As expected, this is what I expected." Sure enough, this place is just as I expected. No wonder you guys can't mine the spirit stones here. In the depths of this spirit vein, there are high-grade spirit stones. Chapter 953. Under the effect of the large formation, the entire ancient tomb began to collapse. All the structures within shook intensely. The empty space cracked and the chaotic flow of space was like numerous large pythons wildly flowing within the ancient tomb. The powerful strength would cause even a 9-star Dodi to feel fear. However, under Luo Ao's shockingly powerful strength, the chaotic flow of space was completely swept away. A shocking Douqi wave swept through the empty space like a tsunami. The silver chaotic flow of space appeared to have been swept away by the tsunami, and was instantly turned into fragments. The path in front of Luo Ao was also swiftly cleared. However, it was also at this moment. Roar! Following a low roar, an enormous beast claw suddenly shot out from a certain spatial vortex. In just one exchange, it instantly tore apart Luo Ao's Douqi wave. What? The appearance of this scene caused the expression on Luo Ao's old face to suddenly change. This was the first time in so many years that something like this had happened. Clang clang clang. Soon after the enormous beast's claw was exposed in the empty space, numerous thunderbolts quickly charged out from the spatial vortex. After which, the enormous body of the mysterious magical beast slowly appeared in front of Luo Ao. The body of the enormous beast was especially large. Its body was pitch black in color. The deep color could be described as hollow, as though it could swallow everything. The enormous beast had 4 limbs. Its front limbs were long, and its back limbs were short. It was like a huge chimpanzee. However, it was far more frightening than the latter. Its enormous head looked like that of a lion. Its innately ferocious appearance caused one to feel fear at first glance. The thunderbolts that surrounded its body were especially shocking. A ferocious aura continued to spread from its body. The empty space under its feet was as weak as a thin piece of paper. This is. Even with Luo Ao's mental state, his heart could not help but feel an intense surge the moment he saw this enormous beast. Void lightning beast. Roar! An earth-shaking beast roar was emitted from the enormous beast's mouth. The invisible empty space collapsed layer by layer. Numerous spatial vortexes continued to agglomerate within the ancient tomb. The frightening chaotic flow of space was like a school of fish in the sea, swallowing everything within the ancient tomb. In the blink of an eye, the entire ancient tomb had collapsed. At the same time as the ancient tomb collapsed, the ground beneath the feet of Xiao Yan and Luo Ao in the large hall completely cracked open. A dazzling golden formation was activated. Shilin region, Shilin mountain range. Under the magma, a pair of scarlet beast eyes slowly opened at this moment. At the same time, a beautiful girl in an ice blue dress stood on a snowy peak in the heart of the Shilin mountain range. She involuntarily looked towards the western horizon. Yen City. Jin Yao was sitting cross-legged and training in a separate room. Recently, she had heard quite a lot of news related to Xiao Yan. She could not help but feel an unknown joy in her heart when she thought that Xiao Yan was now able to stand on equal footing with the 4 large sections. This seemed to be even more exciting than the increase of her own cultivation. Suddenly, Jin Yao felt a piercing pain in her heart. Even though it was only for a short moment, it caused her to suddenly open her eyes. The moment she opened her eyes, Xiao Yan's figure involuntarily appeared in her mind. Jin Yao furrowed her brows and looked towards the west through the window. She could not help but feel a trace of worry in her heart. At the same time, in the plaza of Emerald Green City, a golden formation was activated from time to time. Light flickered and figures came and went. This was the transportation formation from the western region to the southern region. Buzz buzz buzz. Following a golden flash in the plaza, a dozen people appeared in the originally empty plaza as if they were performing a magic trick. Among the dozen people, a rather sloppy old man in white robes was currently holding a wine jar in one hand. He scanned his surroundings. When he looked at the formation beneath his feet, a trace of disdain flashed across the depths of his eyes. Xiaoyan brat, you really made this old man look for you. He could not help but mutter in his heart. A tired expression involuntarily flashed across the old man's eyes. The continent was very big. Looking for a person in this place was no different from looking for a needle in a haystack. Even the information that he had obtained at this moment was only obtained by chance not long ago. Of course, even if this was the case, he could not be completely sure that this was the person he was looking for just based on this name alone. However, regardless of whether this was true or not, this was the only clue he had now. It was worth a try. This old man was Xiao Mingyuan, who had traveled all the way from the central region to the border of the continent in order to search for his clan members. Carrying the wine jar in his hand, the old man lifted his feet and walked towards the city. Just as he stepped out of the plaza, a young lady brushed past him. Oh! The old man's footsteps suddenly paused. He could not help but feel a little surprised in his heart. His gaze turned and swept across the young lady. Why would a member of the Heaven Demon Phoenix tribe exist in this barren land of the continent? The old man was surprised in his heart. Immediately, he shook his head and tossed aside these unnecessary distracting thoughts. He continued to walk towards the city. The young lady stepped onto the plaza and stood in the middle of the formation. She raised her head and looked towards the sky. A black-robed figure involuntarily appeared in her mind. She had already heard from the latter that he had come from the southern region. This time around, she wanted to use the opportunity of training to go and take a look at the place that he had come from. This young lady was Murong Qianqian, who had left the clan by herself. The few years of training and growth caused the young lady to appear much more mature than before. However, there was still some childishness on her pretty face that had yet to disappear. A short moment later, the large formation was once again activated. Under the continuous pouring of energy from the spirit stones, the formation was activated. Murong Qianqian and the dozen-plus people who were with her disappeared from the plaza in the blink of an eye. On the other side, Xiao Mingyuan was walking in boredom on the streets of the city. He planned to temporarily rest here for a day and inquire about information regarding Xiao Yan at the same time. He would set off tomorrow to search for traces of the latter. Just as his footsteps were leisurely moving forward, an old man wearing a brocade robe in a pavilion suddenly looked at him. The moment he saw the latter, the old man's eyes narrowed. A hint of fear flashed across the depths of his eyes. He quickly and carefully withdrew the aura in his body. In the blink of an eye, the old man looked like an ordinary person without any do chi. However, in Green Jade City, no one would treat him as an ordinary person. The deacon of the Union Pavilion, the strongest person in Green Jade City, a 2-star Dodi Zhang Yi. Seeing Xiaoming Yuan's figure gradually disappear into the distance, an extremely obscure light flashed across the depths of Zhang Yi's eyes. After a long time, when Xiaoming Yuan's figure had completely disappeared, Zhang Yi clenched his fist and loosened it. A bird was formed. Mobile version update website. Chapter 954. Peng Lu, what do you want now? In a small village, at this moment, a large group of villagers dressed in ordinary clothes were surrounding a few figures. The leader of the villagers was a strong young man who was glaring angrily at a nefarious young man with a ruffian aura in front of him. He shouted angrily, Zhu Chong, I haven't seen you for a few days and your voice has become much louder. You actually dare to shout at me like this. Hearing the burly young man's roar, the nefarious youth stretched out his little finger and lightly picked his ear with a sneer on his face. We have already paid last month's tax. What are you doing here? Zhu Chong's gaze swept across the few people behind Peng Lu with fear, as he said in a deep voice with displeasure. Yes, you are right. You have indeed paid last month's tax. Of course, I will not forget this, Peng Lu cackled, and it actually looked a little strange. But, you haven't paid this month's taxes yet. However, in the next instant, Peng Lu's tone suddenly changed. His eyes were filled with ridicule as he stared at Zhu Chong. The words he spat out caused the expressions of the group of villagers in front of him to change. Peng Lu, what do you mean by this? Every month's tax has always been paid at the end of the month. It has only been half a month and you are already here to collect taxes. What do you want us to give you? This has nothing to do with me. I am only responsible for collecting taxes. Remember 100 low-level spirit stones, not one less. Otherwise, I will send all of you to the Bear Steel mercenary group. I think you should all know the consequences of entering that group. Hearing Zhu Chong's angry roar, Peng Lu sneered with a look of indifference. He did not care about the life and death of the people in front of him. To him, the most important thing was the spirit stones. As long as the spirit stones were in his hands, it did not matter even if the people in front of him died. Peng Lu, you're making things difficult for us. In the past, we would need at least a month to produce 100 spiritual stones from Ji Mountain. Now it's only been half a month. How can we produce that amount? Are you trying to push us to our deaths? Zhu Chong roared. He naturally knew the result of being sent to the Bear Steel mercenary group. None of the villagers were destined to survive. He knew that Peng Lu must have other plans. The latter understood them too well. That fellow definitely had his own motives for forcing them like this. Zhu Chong, you're wrong. Even if you're really dead, the one who forced you to your deaths isn't me. It's the Northern Desolate Hall. The taxes have been collected early. This is an order from the higher-ups. I'm just following orders. You just have to pay the taxes. As for whether you can pay them or not, it has nothing to do with me. Peng Lu coldly spat out these words. He turned around and was about to leave with his men. However, he seemed to have thought of something the moment he turned around. He turned his head slightly and stared at Zhu Chong. However, it's not that I can't help you. However, that will depend on whether you are willing to grasp this opportunity. What do you want? Zhu Chong's expression sunk. He seemed to have thought of something in his heart. At the same time his expression changed, the do chi in his body began to circulate involuntarily. If you're willing to give your sister chi. Before Peng Lu could finish speaking, Zhu Chong's figure suddenly rushed forward explosively. The tyrannical aura of an 8-star half-martial emperor immediately swept forth. The powerful oppressive power immediately rushed toward Peng Lu. His sister was his only taboo. Anyone who dared to touch this line, regardless of who they were, would die. However, Peng Lu was completely fearless in the face of Zhu Chang's overbearing aura. The corner of his mouth was lifted into a cold smile. He calmly raised his hand and suddenly slammed it down. Swoosh! Almost at the same time, a middle-aged man beside him swiftly attacked. In the blink of an eye, he violently collided with Zhu Chang. Bang! The middle-aged man's body was as stable as Mount Tai after the collision. He did not move. When he looked at Zhu Chang, he was forced back by the middle-aged man's attack. He fell into the crowd and was suppressed. Humph! You are merely an 8-heart half-emperor. Yet you wish to kill me. In the past, I kept you alive because I saw that you were able to lead this group of people to bring me benefits. However, from the looks of it, you wish to rebel against me today. Peng Lu coldly laughed. He walked forward. His gaze was dense and cold as he looked at Zhu Chang, who was standing up in a miserable manner. A killing intent flashed across his eyes. Since you will sooner or later become a scourge if I keep you alive, I shall take this opportunity to send you on your way today. Peng Lu waved his large sleeve the instant his words sounded. Immediately, an extremely powerful aura swiftly spread out from within his body. Under the pressure of this aura, even the few 9-star half-emperors behind him revealed frightened expressions on their faces. Dodi. A 1-star Dodi. Even though this strength was considered nothing at the level of an elite Dodi, a 1-star Dodi was sufficient to suppress everyone present in this place. Dodi. At this moment, even Zhu Chang's heart was incomparably shocked. He had never expected that the person in front of him, who appeared like a ruffian, had actually reached the Dodi class. You are very surprised, aren't you? I have never revealed my true strength to anyone during all these years. However, since you wish to kill me today, I shall make an exception and personally finish you off. Peng Lu coldly laughed. He raised his hand and a turbulent Do Qi immediately agglomerated in the empty space in front of him, transforming into a large hand. Soon after, it violently fell towards Zhu Chang. And in the next moment, buzz! The large energy hand that was falling suddenly paused in midair. Soon after, 2 human figures slowly appeared in the empty space. The 2 of them were a man and a woman. At this moment, the man extended a finger and gently touched the large energy hand in front of him. Break! An indifferent word was spat out from his mouth. At the same time, the large energy hand in front of the man shattered with a sound. Very quickly it disappeared from this world. At this moment, everyone present was stunned on the spot. Numerous gazes involuntarily landed on the body of the black-robed young man. Only a long while later did these people appear to have recovered one by one. The expressions on their faces were gradually replaced by shock. This was especially the case for Peng Lu. The shock in her heart was even more difficult to describe. At this moment, the black-robed young man who was standing in the empty space and breaking Peng Lu's large energy hand with a finger was the person who should have been in the Heaven and Ancient Tomb, and should have been submerged by the collapse of the ancient tomb. Xiaoyan. Mobile version update website. Chapter 955. A moment ago, in an ancestral hall filled with the vicissitudes of life, the strangely shaped floor suddenly flashed, and a dazzling golden light was emitted from it. It was like a sun, and it immediately alarmed the people outside the ancestral hall. There was a small courtyard outside of the ancestral hall. There were a few rooms built around it, surrounding the ancestral hall. There was a corridor at the front of the ancestral hall. On the other side of the corridor was a small bamboo forest, blocking the main entrance to the ancestral hall. Hence, unless one was in front of the ancestral hall, one would not be able to clearly see the situation inside the ancestral hall. At this moment, between the pillars of the corridor, a young girl was shyly looking at the bright light emitted from the ancestral hall. Her pair of strange eyes flashed with a curious splendor. After a short while, the golden light in the ancestral hall gradually disappeared. Under the young girl's shocked gaze, 2 figures appeared in the ancestral hall at the same time. At this moment, the young girl was shocked. Although she wanted to escape, for some reason her delicate body seemed to be fixed on the spot, unable to move. She could only look at the 2 people in the ancestral hall with her heart trembling. She was both frightened and curious. Where is this place? Xiao Yan's eyes were surprised and uncertain as he observed the environment he was currently in. Both of his eyes contained some caution as he exchanged glances with Xiaoxian in front of him, after which their eyes rotated. Soon after, they landed in the middle of the ancestral hall. There was a stone statue enshrined here, and the two of them were very clear about the appearance of the stone statue. After all, they had met it not long ago. The stone statue's appearance was that of esteemed Tianju. From the looks of it, the two of them seemed to have fallen into the array that esteemed Tianju had set up long ago. He must have planned to send them here. The ancestral hall enshrines esteemed Tianju. This should be his family, or the place where he was born. Xiao Yan and Xiao Xian's eyes continued to observe their surroundings. Both of them clearly understood that now was not the time to catch up. They must first clearly see the situation in front of them, and wait until everything had calmed down before doing anything else. But why did he send us here? It has been 1,000 years. Even if there is someone or something that he can't let go of, time has passed, and I'm afraid we can't help him achieve it. Moreover, he hasn't told us about it. Xiao Yan looked at the stone statue and shrugged helplessly. He turned around and was about to step out of the ancestral hall. Wait, he must have sent us here for a reason. Also, didn't you notice that there is a trace of his aura here? Xiaoxian smiled. His dark eyes slowly turned, and soon, they locked onto the top of the stone statue. There was a plaque hanging. There were 4 big words written on the plaque in bold strokes. Leave it to fate. Freedom. What a great freedom. Does he mean that it belongs to the fated one? Xiaoxian chuckled faintly. With a thought, his majestic soul power immediately spread out, and turned into an invisible palm that approached the plaque. Xiao Yan was suspicious. He glanced at the plaque and used his soul power to probe it, but he didn't find anything. However, Xiao Yan naturally didn't doubt Xiaoxian at all. Hence, he stood where he was and waited quietly. After a short while, Xiaoxian withdrew his soul power. At the same time, a storage ring appeared in his hand. This is... The expression in Xiao Yan's eyes suddenly solidified the moment he saw this storage ring. His mouth involuntarily let out a surprised cry. Since the storage ring was placed in such a place by Tianju, it must be Tianju's own storage ring. Compared to the things in the ancient tomb, perhaps the things in this storage ring were Tianju's real collection. It was easy to imagine just how precious the storage ring of a returnance expert was. Oh right, the returnance technique. Xiao Yan hurriedly said after returning to his senses. Xiao Xian was slightly startled when he heard this. After which he quickly recovered. Due to him having practiced the first scroll, he could be said to be extremely clear about the secret of the origin returning skill. Compared to others, Xiao Xian's heart should be even more anxious about the importance of this qi method. However, from the looks of the current situation, it seemed that Xiao Yan was even more concerned about it than him. Xiao Xian smiled and shook his head. A thought passed through his mind, and an enormous spiritual strength once again surged out. It was swiftly poured into the storage ring in his hand. Xiao Yan by the side carried a fiery heat as he anxiously waited. A few minutes later, Xiao Xian's soul power withdrew from the storage ring along with a scroll. Needless to say, it was the returnance technique. The returnance technique, it really is the returnance technique. Tianju purposely left the returnance technique here, to prevent those who wantonly destroyed his tomb from obtaining it. That's why it's said to follow fate and rely on human nature. We were lucky. If we hadn't stayed in the palace earlier, we wouldn't have been teleported here, and we wouldn't have been able to avoid that disaster. Soon after, Xiao Xian slowly opened the scroll in his hand with some anticipation. Buzz buzz buzz. Soon after, however, a golden light flashed from within the scroll when it was opened. Xiao Yan and Xiao Xian involuntarily took 2 steps back. After which, an illusionary human figure slowly appeared within the golden light. It was Tianju. However, it was only an image, and they couldn't talk freely like before. Fated person, since you were able to open this scroll for me, it means that this is fate between us. This scroll originally shouldn't belong to me, but everything is fate. To be able to pass through the formation and come here, it means that your temperament is not bad. Therefore, I hope that you can help me with one last thing. If the village where the ancestral hall is still around, I hope that you can do one thing for the village before you leave. The returnance technique and all the items in my storage ring will be your reward. In addition, you only need to do one thing. After that, no matter what happens to the village in the future, it will no longer have anything to do with you. If the village is already destroyed by the time you see this, then everything will be fine." The image ended at this point. Xiao Yan and Xiao Xian were startled as they looked at each other. After which, the scroll returned to Xiao Xian's hand. Soon after, the two of them turned around in unison. Two pairs of dark black eyes looked at the corridor outside of the ancestral hall. There, a young lady in a red dress was looking at the image that had disappeared from the ancestral hall in a daze. She didn't notice Xiao Yan and Xiao Xian's gazes. Chapter 956. On the ground, Pang Lu's complexion was deathly pale. Her heart was filled with fear as she raised her head to look at the black-robed figure that was faintly floating in the air. Cold sweat unceasingly flowed down from her forehead, and soon her clothes were drenched. "You, who are you?" "The person who will kill you." Without any superfluous words, Xiao Yan extended his hand and flipped it in the air towards Pang Lu. Almost at the same time, a powerful force came crashing down on Pang Lu's head. Before she could even scream in fear, Pang Lu's body and soul were instantly crushed. They turned into a bloody mist that slowly dissipated. The instant this scene appeared, the young girl beside Xiao Yan covered her delicate and pretty little face in fear. Her delicate and pretty face was filled with shock. As for Zhu Chang and the others behind her, they were so shocked that their mouths were wide open. Their dumbfounded expressions appeared rather comical. Only after that did Xiao Yan nonchalantly turn around. Seeing those shocked gazes, he was already used to it. Helplessly, he shrugged his shoulders, turned his head to the young girl beside him, and said with a smile, "Is this all right?" Hearing Xiao Yan's words, the young girl timidly removed her pair of lily-white hands that were covering her face. She timidly looked at the former, then hurriedly turned her gaze away. At the same time, her little head nodded like a little chick pecking at rice. It was considered a response. Seeing this, Xiao Yan casually smiled. Then he turned his gaze and looked at those 9-star half-martial emperors. His expression suddenly turned cold, and with an indifferent tone he said, "Scram. Go back and tell your master that not a single person here is allowed to touch them. Otherwise, you will end up like him." Xiao Yan's cold cry caused the few 9-star half-emperors to be so frightened that they fell to the ground on their butts. Only after Xiao Yan's words sounded did these fellows hurriedly flee in panic, using their fastest speed to leave this place. Junior Zhu Chang thanks Senior for saving my life. At the moment when Xiao Yan turned around, Zhu Chang and the villagers behind him all knelt down and respectfully bowed to Xiao Yan. "This, my daughter, Kair, would also like to thank Senior for saving her brother." Just as Xiao Yan was about to open his mouth, the young girl beside him also quickly knelt on the ground, her pretty face filled with gratitude. Xiao Yan waved his sleeves and an invisible strength spread out, lifting up the kneeling crowd in front of him. Everyone felt even more shocked in their hearts when they saw this scene. At the same time that they stood up, the respect in their eyes when they looked at Xiao Yan became even denser. "Thank you, Senior. There's no need to say such things. I was asked to do so by someone. That's why I took action." After casually glancing at Zhu Chang, Xiao Yan turned and looked at the young girl. His pitch-black eyes stared at the young girl's multicolored eyes, and he couldn't help but click his tongue in amazement. If esteemed Tianju's request was one of the reasons why he stayed, then the young girl in front of him was another reason why he was still standing there at this moment. Seeing that Xiao Yan's gaze had actually landed on Zhu Chang's face couldn't help but change slightly. He took 2 steps forward and cupped his hands at Xiao Yan while pulling the young girl behind him. "Regardless of whether you were asked to do so by someone or not, since you have saved our village, I would like to be bold and invite you to the village. I hope you can agree." "Haha, little guy, it seems that this kid thinks you're a pervert." Suddenly, Xiao Xian's mocking laughter rang out from Xiao Yan's body. It was really difficult for anyone not to notice such an obvious scene. As Xiao Xian was currently in a soul state, his body was rather weak. As a result, he entered Xiao Yan's body and used Xiao Yan's heavenly flame to nourish himself while sorting out the power of inheritance contained within esteemed Tianju's soul origin. Hearing that, Xiao Yan could only helplessly smile bitterly. His expression didn't change as he nodded at Zhu Chang. Afterwards, he followed the latter into the village. Along the way, Zhu Chang led the way for Xiao Yan, while the others obediently followed behind. From time to time, they would speak with both joy and worry. Now that Pang Lu was dead, they were temporarily safe. However, Pang Lu's death didn't bring them long-term peace. Instead, Zhu village would soon face an even greater threat. Sigh, Pang Lu is dead, but what about the taxes from above? In the past, we might have been able to take out 100 spiritual stones. However, the taxes from above have been increasing in recent years, and the output of the spiritual vein has been decreasing. Gathering 100 spiritual stones every month is already a huge pressure on us. I didn't expect them to be so excessive this time. It's been less than half a month since the last tax payment, and they actually came to rush us again. They are really forcing us into a dead end. Yes, the spiritual veins have been very strange recently. Although spiritual stones can be seen everywhere, it is difficult to mine a single piece even after using all our manpower and resources. This is the first time this has happened in so many years. Moreover, this time even Kai was unable to do anything. This is really making people nervous. Xiao Yan, who was walking slowly, suddenly heard the words coming from behind. He couldn't help but pause slightly. He frowned slightly and turned around to look at the two old men who were talking. The bodies of the two old men paused when they saw Xiao Yan's gaze being shot over. The expressions on their old faces were initially startled. Soon after, they hurriedly bowed to Xiao Yan, afraid that they would slight the other party. You just said that the spiritual vein is a mountain range that specializes in producing spiritual stones? Xiao Yan raised his hand and helped the two old men, who were bowing to him, up as he curiously inquired. The two old men's expressions paused. They looked at each other, then nodded and said, "Senior is right. Senior is right. The spirit vein that we are talking about is the mountain range that produces spirit stones. You just said that spiritual stones can be seen everywhere in the spiritual vein, but can't be mined, right?" Xiao Yan nodded and said again, "Yes. Could it be that Senior knows the reason?" Hearing Xiao Yan's question, the two old men's eyes revealed a hint of joy as they hurriedly asked, "Perhaps. If it's really as I think, then perhaps I have a way to solve this problem. Of course, first, I have to see the spiritual vein." Xiao Yan smiled slightly. The joy in his heart could not be suppressed. If it was really as he thought, then he had to go to the spiritual vein. "I'm sorry, Senior. The spiritual vein is related to the lives of our entire village. If something happens, everyone in our Zhu village will be implicated, so, brother, now is not the time to talk about these rules. If we can't take out 100 spiritual stones, the Northern Wasteland Palace will definitely send people here. At that time, we will end up in the same situation. Rather than that, why don't we give it a try? Let Senior take a look. Perhaps he can help us get through this crisis safely." Just as Zhu Chang was about to speak, Kai who was beside him, interrupted him. Her beautiful face was filled with anticipation as she looked at Xiao Yan. Yes. Senior's cultivation is powerful. He will definitely be able to help us get through this crisis. Yes, he is willing to take the initiative to help us. This is already a great gift. We can't just reject him like this. Since we won't have a good ending if we can't hand over the spiritual stones, why don't we give it a try? When the time comes, as long as we hand over the spiritual stones, Pang Lu's death can be considered as an explanation." Yes. Hearing Kai Er's words, before Zhu Chang could do anything, the villagers behind him spoke one after another. The crowd leaned toward Xiao Yan, and Zhu Chang was isolated. With an awkward expression on his face, Zhu Chang's gaze quickly swept across the crowd of villagers before landing on Kai. Seeing the latter's hopeful smile, Zhu Chang then looked at Xiao Yan, respectfully clasped his hands and smiled awkwardly. "In that case, I'll have to trouble Senior. Come. Wonderful book house. Come." Chapter 957. Xiao Yan and Xiao Xian stood side by side in the ancestral hall. The two of them looked at the young lady in a red dress in front of the corridor with a slightly different gaze. They were even more shocked when they noticed her beautiful, multicolored eyes. This is illusory heavenly eyes. The two of them looked at each other. Their breathing paused for a few seconds before they could not help but exclaim in surprise. The moment the two of them spoke, The red-dressed young lady was also startled by the two of them. The seven-colored glow in her pretty eyes flickered slightly before it quickly dimmed. Her expression was panicked as she took 2 steps back. The young lady lifted her gaze and quickly noticed Xiao Yan and Shuang. Ah! The young lady's mouth involuntarily emitted an exclamation. She turned around with the intention of fleeing. However, she seemed to have forgotten that the corridor she was in was horizontal. The moment she turned around, her somewhat cute appearance collided with a pillar behind her. Immediately, an exclamation sounded once again. Xiao Yan and Shuang were also provoked into laughter by this scene. Then their figures flickered slightly. In the blink of an eye, they had already appeared before the young lady. "Girl, are you all right?" "Ah, I'm fine," the young lady in a red dress said timidly. The girl in the red dress said timidly. She raised her head and looked at the two people's kind smiles. The fear in her heart couldn't help but dissipate. Who are you? Why have you come here?" the young lady asked timidly. Xiao Yan and Xiao Xian felt rather awkward. To be honest, they did not know why they had come here. They did not even know where they were right now. "Haha, we're just two passers-by. Perhaps it's because of the plaque in your ancestral hall. Let fate take its course, and that's why we've come here." Xiao Xian smiled as he looked at the young lady with kind eyes that were filled with wisdom and kindness. "Let fate take its course? Then you're fated people?" The young lady gradually let down her guard. The smile on her pretty face could not help but make people feel tender affection for her. "Yes, fated people. Can you tell us?" Boom! Just as Xiao Xian was about to finish his sentence, a violent bang in the distance interrupted his words. The sound was accompanied by a painful roar. The expression on the pretty face of the girl in the red dress suddenly changed. A deep worry appeared on her pretty face. Her mouth also hurriedly shouted in alarm. "Brother Yi!" she hurriedly shouted. "It's Big Brother!" With a cry of surprise, the young lady's eyes turned. She looked anxiously at Xiao Yan and Xiao Xian with a pleading expression. Although she did not know who the two people in front of her were, just by looking at their appearance, the young lady was certain that they were definitely strong. At least, they were definitely stronger than her brother. Although Xiao Yan did not know exactly what had happened, Xiao Yan would naturally not ignore this matter since Tianju had made a request first, and they had already obtained the Gui Yuan skill and Tianju's storage ring. "Haha, don't worry. Since we're fated, we'll help you solve your brother's problem." With a smile, Xiao Yan stretched out his hand and grabbed the young lady's wrist. Xiao Xian and Xiao Yan looked at each other. Xiao Xian's figure twisted slightly, turned into a stream of light, and flashed into Xiao Yan's body. Then, Xiao Yan took the young lady and disappeared from the corridor in the blink of an eye. In front of a huge barren mountain, there were rocks everywhere. The mountain path was rugged and steep, making it difficult for ordinary people to climb. However, in front of a half-emperor expert, this was nothing. At this moment, somewhere in this barren mountain, a group of 5 people was standing in front of a huge rock. The space below was not large, and behind them was a high cliff. If they were not careful, they would be in grave danger. Among the 5 people, in addition to Xiao Yan, there was Zhu Chong, Kai and the 2 old men who were talking to each other earlier. A thought passed through Xiao Yan's mind as he stood in front of this enormous rock. He spread out the spiritual strength within his body and carefully probed this mountain range. A short moment later, Xiao Yan helplessly withdrew the spiritual strength that he had spread out. Even after inspecting inch by inch, Xiao Yan was still unable to find any clues. Outside of this spiritual vein, he was unable to detect any energy ripples. Looking at it from the outside, this barren mountain was no different from the other mountains. If a person were to fly over it, he or she would not be able to find any clues about this place. If Zhu Chong was not leading the way, even Xiao Yan would not believe that this place was actually a spiritual vein. It is indeed a creation of the heavens and earth. It is impossible to see anything from the outside just by relying on human strength. No wonder spirit stones are so difficult to find on the continent. This thing is not something that can be found by just relying on soul power. It also requires some luck. With a sigh in his heart, Xiao Yan watched as Zhu Chong walked to the front of the huge rock and placed his hand on it. As dough qi was poured in, a rumbling sound quickly sounded from the inside of the huge rock. Soon after, the huge rock slowly descended with a heavy sound. Only when half of it was buried in the ground did it slowly come to a stop. At this moment, in front of Xiao Yan's group, a tunnel that could only fit one person appeared. "Sir, this is the entrance to the spiritual vein." Zhu Chang made an inviting gesture and led the way in front. Xiao Yan followed closely behind, followed by Kai and the two old men. After entering the tunnel, it only took a short while for the tunnel in front of them to gradually expand. Soon after, it expanded to the point where it could fit 10 people side by side. The expression on Xiao Yan's face immediately changed slightly after he entered this place. He could clearly sense the dense energy that permeated this tunnel. Training in this place would definitely yield twice the results with half the effort compared to the outside world. However, the difference was that the energy in this place might be more abundant, but at the same time, it was also more heterogeneous. Refining it required more time and effort. However, this was not a problem for Xiao Yan. Unfortunately, Xiao Yan did not have the intention to stay here. Otherwise, his cultivation would definitely be able to increase by a large amount in a short period of time. While he was surprised by the environment here, Xiao Yan could not help but look at Kai, who was wearing a red dress behind him. Xiao Yan had been observing Kai after entering this place. Her pair of colorful eyes had originally appeared ordinary after entering this place. However, her eyes would involuntarily emit a colorful glow in this place. By relying on his powerful spiritual strength, Xiao Yan could clearly sense that the mixed energy within this cave was actually moving toward Kai. Or perhaps it could be said that her body was automatically absorbing the energy within this cave. The mottled energy constantly poured into the delicate body of the girl. The latter was like a black hole that specialized in absorbing energy, absorbing all the energy in the cave. As for the people around her, although they were more or less aware of it, they seemed to have long been accustomed to it. Therefore, their faces did not reveal any strange expressions. However, at this moment, Xiao Yan could clearly sense the abnormally large amount of energy hidden in the depths of Kai's body. Xiao Yan's heart froze, and he subconsciously swallowed a mouthful of saliva. He was especially shocked in his heart. Is this the illusory spirit pupil? It's really terrifying. Chapter 958. The illusory spirit pupil was one of the few special pupils that Xiao Yan knew of in the mainland. Before this, the one that Xiao Yan had seen was Qinglin back then. The pair of eyes with the green flower pupils was still deeply etched in his memory. The triple jade green snake flower pupils could forcefully control any snake-type magical beast of the same level or below. The amount of control was determined by the user's cultivation base. After control, the user could gradually devour and absorb the latter's cultivation base for their own use. It could be said to be the nemesis of all snake-type magical beasts. Back then, Qinglin stirred up the entire 9-abyss deep-ground python because of this. This time, the illusory spirit pupil that Kai possessed was another special pupil with a different effect. Just like what happened to Kai at this moment, the illusory spirit pupil could devour any energy in the world that was not controlled by humans and absorb it without any difficulty. It even skipped the process of refining it, making it exceptionally easy to cultivate. As long as one possessed the illusory spirit pupil, one's cultivation speed would be several times faster than ordinary people, even if one did not deliberately cultivate it. It could be said to be a natural cultivation accelerator. Unfortunately, looking at Kai, now, it seemed that she did not know how to use the illusory spirit pupil. According to what the two old men said earlier, when they were mining spiritual stones in the past, as long as Kai was present, the mining speed would be twice the result with half the effort. This was because of the illusory spirit pupil's ability to absorb energy. Of course, the reason why it was so difficult to mine now should be because of what Xiao Yan thought in his heart. Although the illusory spirit pupil was a great tool that could help with cultivation, at the same time, it also had a fatal flaw. At the same time, it was also an incomparable advantage. It could directly devour and absorb the energy of the world. This made the owner of the illusory spirit pupil an unparalleled cultivation genius in the world. At the same time, it also made it a walking spiritual stone in the eyes of many cultivators. The illusory spirit pupil could allow the owner to directly absorb the energy of the world without any difficulty. At the same time, the illusory spirit pupil could also use an extreme method to perfectly graft the owner's cultivation base onto another person. There were two methods of grafting. First, it would be delivered at a slow speed. Of course, although the process was slow, the power obtained would be much more than the usual cultivation. After the delivery process was completed, the effect of the illusory spirit pupil would be completely nullified, and it would no longer have any abilities. At the same time, the owner would also be permanently blinded, and their cultivation would also vanish at the same time. As for the other method, it was to change pupils. At the same time as changing pupils, in the shortest amount of time, one's own cultivation would be grafted onto another person's body, creating an expert in the shortest amount of time. As for the person who originally possessed the illusory spirit eyes, they would be crippled and their cultivation would be destroyed. In the worst-case scenario, they would not be able to keep their life and would be in a miserable state. However, it was a pity that Kai was unable to use her special pupils. If this continued, a cultivation genius like her would likely be destroyed in this tiny village. Very quickly, under Zhu Chang's lead, the group of 5 passed through the cave and arrived at the deepest part of the cave. Along the way, Xiao Yan and the others saw quite a number of villagers. They were waving special tools and pouring dou qi into them as they repeatedly knocked on the walls of the cave on both sides. Occasionally, they could see spiritual stones that were exposed from within. Unfortunately, no one was able to successfully remove those spiritual stones from the walls. As they approached the deeper parts of the cave, there was a stuffy hot aura in the air. With the exception of Xiao Yan, everyone present already appeared to be dripping with perspiration. Perspiration soaked their clothes. The surrounding villagers that they met were all topless as they worked hard to extract the spiritual stones. The deeper they went, the stronger the cultivation of the villagers. Perhaps they were worried that those fellows outside would not be able to withstand the high temperature and stuffy heat. Turning his eyes, Xiao Yan randomly glanced at Kai, behind him. However, he suddenly realized that at this moment, the young lady was wearing a red dress that was drenched in perspiration, tightly wrapping around her exquisite and lovely body. Her alluring figure was also vividly displayed at this moment. This caused Xiao Yan to feel a little embarrassed as he hurriedly turned his gaze away. He subconsciously rubbed his nose and swiftly followed. The closer they got to the deepest part of the cave, the higher the temperature in the air. At the same time, Xiao Yan could also feel that in the deepest part of the cave, there was an extremely vigorous aura. This kind of energy was both pure and enormous. It was simply not something that any spiritual stones could compare to. This also confirmed Xiao Yan's thoughts. Soon, the group arrived at the deepest part of the cave. At this time, the 2 old men had already stopped in the distance. The high temperature here was already unbearable for them. Zhu Chang's face was also red as he bitterly endured. Sweat constantly poured out from his body. Although he had already taken off his clothes and used his dou qi, he was still unable to completely withstand the high temperature here. As for Kai, although the young lady was holding on with her superhuman willpower, she was already tottering as if she could faint at any time. Buzz! With a wave of his big sleeve, an invisible force immediately spread out and easily separated the terrifyingly high temperature surrounding the 3 of them. Soon after, Xiao Yan raised his gaze and looked at the end of the tunnel in front of him. Although this was the deepest part of the cave, the spiritual stones that could be seen everywhere emitted a gentle light, illuminating the entire cave as if it was daytime. At this moment, in front of Xiao Yan and the other 2, there was a vast expanse of soft white light. Narrowing his eyes, Xiao Yan's gaze passed through this layer of white light and looked at the other side. There was a protruding milky white crystal. With Xiao Yan's eyesight, he could naturally see that these spiritual stones were all middle-rank spiritual stones without a doubt. In fact, Xiao Yan could even feel that in the depths of these spiritual stones, there was an even more enormous energy. This kind of energy belonged to a high-rank spiritual stone. High-rank spiritual stone. As expected, this spiritual vein really does have high-rank spiritual stones. A glint flickered in Xiao Yan's eyes. There was a joy that could not be suppressed in his heart. High-rank spiritual stone. If he was able to obtain one, it would undoubtedly be of great help to his cultivation. Moreover, the strength of his 9 incarnations was currently at a standstill. If he was able to obtain the help of a high-rank spiritual stone, Xiaoyan was confident that he would be able to raise his strength to the advanced level of a 5-star Do-Di. In this way, it would be quite a great help to Xiaoyan. Sir, may I know if you have any ideas about this? The surrounding temperature suddenly dropped. The pressure on Zhu Chang and Kai Er's bodies was also greatly reduced. The 2 pairs of eyes landed on Xiaoyan's body. Their eyes revealed an expression of anticipation. Hearing this, Xiaoyan smiled slightly and said, "As expected, this is what I expected." Sure enough, this place is just as I expected. No wonder you guys can't mine the spirit stones here. In the depths of this spirit vein, there are high-grade spirit stones. Mobile version update website, M. Chapter 959. High-grade spirit stones. Upon hearing Xiaoyan's words, Zhu Chang and Kai Er could not help but reveal a shocked expression. The shock in their hearts could not be any greater. As everyone knew, there were 4 types of spirit stones: low-grade, middle-grade, high-grade and supreme-grade spirit stones. Among these 4 types of spirit stones, high-grade spirit stones and supreme-grade spirit stones were extremely rare. This was especially true for supreme-grade spirit stones. In the past 1,000 years, there had never been any rumors about it on the continent. From this, one could imagine how precious supreme-grade spirit stones were. Of course, although high-grade spirit stones were not as valuable as supreme-grade spirit stones, they were still extremely rare in the entire Yuanwu continent. Even some super sects might not be able to take out a few of them. Generally speaking, even in spirit veins, there might not be any high-grade spirit stones. In most spirit veins, even after excavating the entire mountain, one would still not be able to obtain a single high-grade spirit stone. In fact, there might not even be a mid-grade spirit stone. Therefore, once a high-grade spirit stone appeared, various factions would definitely fight over it. The spirit veins where the high-grade spirit stones were located would inevitably become the target of all parties. Therefore, after hearing Xiaoyan's words, Zhu Chang's heart could be said to be filled with both joy and worry. He was happy that high-grade spirit stones had appeared. This would definitely attract the attention of experts for their Zhu clan village. At that time, the Northern Desolation Hall, the faction that they belonged to, would definitely send experts over. The Zhu clan village might even be able to use this opportunity to gain the recognition of the sect. As long as someone from their village could successfully join the Northern Desolation Hall, this would undoubtedly bring peace to the village. This was a great thing for the entire village. However, what he was worried about was his sister Kai Er. Although he did not know why she had a pair of multicolored eyes, he could feel that his sister's eyes were definitely not the eyes of an ordinary person. If she attracted the attention of a powerhouse, he would be fine, but he was worried that his sister would be harmed. "Brother, I didn't expect there to be high-grade spirit stones here. As long as we excavate these spirit stones and hand them over to the Northern Desolation Hall, you can—" "No, we can't hand over the high-grade spirit stones here." Before Kai Er could finish speaking, Zhu Chang spoke in a stern voice, interrupting her with a single sentence. The might and ruthlessness contained in his words frightened the young girl, causing her to involuntarily take 2 steps back. She timidly looked at her brother, who had never lost his temper with her before, with a pair of bright multicolored eyes already filled with mist. "Haha, Kai, don't blame your brother. He's doing this for you, he's just—" At this point, Xiaoyan looked at Zhu Chang. Hearing Xiaoyan's words, Zhu Chang's expression suddenly changed. It was as if he was afraid that Xiaoyan would reveal the truth. Once the girl knew about her special constitution, she would be even more afraid of the outside world. "Haha, your brother just doesn't want to leave you. After all, as long as you join the sect, you won't be able to enter and leave at will in the future. It's very restrictive. Your brother doesn't want to hand over the high-grade spirit stones because he's afraid that he'll be forcefully taken back by the sect's experts, so don't blame him." After Xiaoyan finished speaking, Kai widened her pair of watery eyes and stared at Zhu Chang with her beautiful eyes. Then, she directly threw herself into the latter's arms with a touched look on her face. While calling out for her brother, she couldn't help but burst into tears. Looking at the brother and sister in front of him, Xiaoyan's lips curled into a warm smile. while Zhu Chang also nodded at Xiaoyan with gratitude. He lowered his head and looked at the girl in his arms with a complicated expression. After wiping away the tears at the corner of the girl's eyes, the two of them let go of each other's arms. Then, Zhu Chang turned his gaze to Xiaoyan and said respectfully, "Senior, I'll have to trouble you with the spirit stones here." "No problem. It just so happens that I haven't experienced high-grade spirit stones yet. Today, I'll take it as an opportunity to get to know them." Xiaoyan smiled faintly. He immediately flipped his hand and a puff sound could be heard. A fierce, dense white flame suddenly rose from his palm. A frighteningly high temperature immediately spread. The originally stuffy temperature within the cave had once again become dry and hot in an instant. The moisture that was contained in the air was incinerated into nothingness in an instant. "This is a heavenly flame." Looking at the white flame rising from Xiaoyan's hand, Zhu Chang's face once again revealed a shocked expression. No wonder the person in front of him was so powerful even though he was clearly much younger than him. It turned out that he had the help of a heavenly flame. To be able to possess a heavenly flame at such a young age, he's definitely not an ordinary person. Carrying the shock in his heart, Zhu Chang pulled Kai aside and the two of them quickly retreated. In this kind of situation, their existence would not be of any help. In fact, if they continued to stay, they might even bring trouble to Xiaoyan. Therefore, leaving this place was their best choice. After walking far away, the brother and sister watched from afar as Xiaoyan raised his palm. The raging flame on his palm turned into a ball of fire, and then Xiaoyan suddenly waved his palm forward. The flame in his palm immediately shot forward, and immediately after, it fiercely bombarded the spirit stones that were connected to each other in the deepest part of the cave. Bam! A dull explosion sounded out, and the cave where the three of them were couldn't help but shake violently. The two old men and the villagers behind them in the distance were also shocked by the huge commotion, but soon after, a series of explosive booms sounded out one after another. Bang bang bang. In the depths of the cave, Xiaoyan controlled the heavenly flame and fiercely burned the spirit stones in front of him. This did not have any effect on the spirit stones, but it was able to separate the spirit stones that were originally connected together. Each spirit stone would become a hexagonal crystal of the right size. The creation of the world allowed each of these spirit stones to contain the same energy. This was truly a work of the gods. With Xiaoyan's cultivation and the heavenly flame, it was extremely easy for him to mine these spirit stones. However, he also discovered that the deeper the heavenly flame went into the mountain cave, the closer it got to the high-grade spirit stones. The degree of connection between these ordinary middle-grade spirit stones also became increasingly close. The energy between them appeared to be connected together and merged together. This was also because of the high-grade spirit stones. The high-grade spirit stones were able to absorb the energy within the surrounding spirit stones for their own use. Only through years of infusion and the polishing of time could they finally become supreme-grade spirit stones. It could be said that the formation of high-grade spirit stones was essentially the same principle as the cultivation of living beings. They both stood out from millions of others, but unfortunately, in the end, they benefited the living beings of the world. Therefore, in this world, there was no such thing as the strongest. There was always someone better than you. And no one knew if the land you stood on was just a speck of dust in the eyes of someone else. Even so, the living beings of this world had to constantly compete. After all, the only way to see this world clearly was to reach the peak of peerless power. And here, the Origin Emperor was the peak. Crack. As a middle-grade spirit stone fell, a dazzling white light bloomed in front of Xiaoyan like a flower. The high-grade spirit stone had appeared. Mobile version website. Chapter 960. The white light shone like a pure white flower. It was so bright that one could not bear to look at it directly. The entire cave was illuminated by the white light. A long while later, the white light gradually dimmed, and the sight in front of Xiaoyan's eyes slowly became clear. A spiritual stone, or rather, a lump of spiritual stones, appeared before Xiaoyan's eyes. Half of it was embedded in the mountain, while the other half was exposed to Xiaoyan. The reason why it was called a lump of spiritual stones was because it was not just a single high-grade spiritual stone. At this moment, What appeared before Xiaoyan was a total of 5 high-grade spiritual stones connected together. 5 high-grade spiritual stones. Even some of the high-grade sects did not have them. In other words, the 5 high-grade spiritual stones in front of Xiaoyan represented the foundation of a sect. Looking at the lump of high-grade spiritual stones, Xiaoyan's heart was stirred up, and he could not calm down for a long time. This was a powerful foundation that could move a sect. It would be a lie to say that he was not tempted. However, the most important thing now was to break down these 5 spiritual stones. Phew! Exhaling deeply, Xiaoyan once again stretched out his palm. A white flame rose from his palm, and gradually attached itself to the lump of spiritual stones according to his thoughts. The scorching heat radiated outwards and seeped into the gaps between each spiritual stone. Bit by bit, the spiritual stones were peeled apart. After all, they were 5 different individuals. Even if they were forcefully joined together by a powerful force, there was still a certain flaw. Xiaoyan only needed to take advantage of this opportunity to seep into the gaps between the 5 spiritual stones, and use the mysterious fire to peel them off. Finally, the 5 high-grade spiritual stones would appear before Xiaoyan's eyes. The degree of connection between the 5 high-grade spirit stones far exceeded that of the middle-tier spirit stones from before. This also caused the speed at which Xiaoyan separated the 5 high-grade spirit stones to be much slower. After using a full hour, the 5 high-grade spirit stones were finally completely separated. Boom! Just as the 5 high-grade spirit stones fell to the ground, the spirit stones embedded in the walls of the cave seemed to have lost their support and fell to the ground with a loud bang. It even saved the effort of mining. In total, there were close to 1,000 spiritual stones here. This was enough for the Zhu clan to live comfortably for a year. Of course, this was under the premise that the Northern Wilderness Palace did not impose any additional taxes. Xiaoyan's eyes burned with passion as he stared at the 5 high-grade spirit stones in front of him. However, he eventually calmed down and suppressed the desire in his heart. Although the spirit stones were precious, he was not a person who would be driven by greed. He would not touch the spirit stones before getting permission. At this moment, Zhu Chang and Kai walked over from behind. Looking at the 5 spirit stones floating in front of Xiaoyan, although Kai didn't know, Zhu Chang recognized them at a glance. High-grade spirit stones. And there are 5 of them. Although Zhu Chang had lived in this small village for a long time, his knowledge was not limited. He clearly knew what 5 high-grade spirit stones meant. The Zhu clan's spirit vein produces high-grade spirit stones. Once the Northern Wilderness Palace finds out, they will definitely send experts over. When that time comes, the Zhu clan will be directly taken over by the Northern Wilderness Palace. Kai, Zhu Chang was shocked and afraid. In the end, he was still afraid that something would happen to the girl beside him. He could care less about his own life, but he had to protect Kai. It was not for anything else, but because Kai was his sister. You said that once they find out about the existence of high-grade spirit stones, it will bring you trouble. As long as they don't know about it, you will be fine. Xiaoyan smiled slightly. There was a hint of calmness in his smile. Suddenly, Zhu Chang raised his eyes and stared at Xiaoyan. His eyes were filled with determination. As long as you can help us get through this trouble, I, Zhu Chang, will give these 5 high-grade spirit stones to you. Aren't you afraid that the villagers will find trouble with you? Xiaoyan's eyes flashed with surprise. This was indeed his plan, but the latter was too decisive. As long as I can keep Kai by my side, I'm not worried about how the people in the village will treat me. Moreover, as long as Sir doesn't tell them about this matter, I don't think they will think that there is actually a high-grade spirit stone here. Zhu Chang smiled in relief. He wasn't worried about the people in the village. After all, they were familiar with each other. They wouldn't be able to do anything to him and his sister. However, if it were the people from the Northern Desolate Palace, they wouldn't care about the so-called half-step sovereigns. Instead of facing them, it would be better to face the people in the village. In that case, I have to thank you in advance. However, I really don't have the fortune to enjoy 5 high-grade spirit stones. How about this? I will leave 1 for you. If nothing happens, you can use it for your own cultivation. If something happens in the future, you can use it to avoid the Northern Wilderness Palace. I just hope that they won't bully you too much. With a smile, Xiaoyan kept the 4 high-grade spirit stones in his storage ring. Without hesitation, he took out one of them and gave it to Zhu Chang. This, Sir, high-grade spirit stones. Just take it as my thanks to you. I am already satisfied to receive 4 high-grade spirit stones out of thin air. Moreover, I see that your talent is not bad. It's just that you don't have good cultivation resources. This is a good opportunity. You can keep this spirit stone. Xiaoyan smiled. Perhaps it was because of his relationship with Kai Er, but he did not feel any antipathy toward Zhu Chang. Even though the latter had revealed a cautious expression toward him earlier, it was still understandable. He could completely understand the protective feeling an older brother had toward his younger sister that was born in their blood. In addition, I see that Kai Er's talent is not bad, but she doesn't cultivate. It should be because she doesn't have a suitable cultivation method, right? With a change of tone, Xiaoyan looked at Kai Er, who was hugging one of Zhu Chang's arms. A touch of pity appeared on his face. To be honest, Kai Er, who had the illusory spirit pupil, was really a natural cultivation genius. It was a pity that Xiaoyan could not take care of himself at the moment. Otherwise, he would definitely take her as his disciple. However, even if he could not take her away, if he left some things for her, it would not be impossible for him to take her in as his disciple in the future. As for now, he would just take her as his disciple. Senior, do you mean you are willing to give Kai Er a suitable cultivation method? Zhu Chang's face was filled with joy. He knew that Kai Er's physique was different from ordinary people. Therefore, in the past, he had not dared to find an ordinary cultivation method for her to cultivate. After all, the cultivation of a cultivation method was related to her life. Once she chose the wrong cultivation method, it was very likely that it would leave behind irreversible consequences in the future. Therefore, he had always been looking for a really good cultivation method for Kai Er, but he had not found one yet. Haha, no, I don't intend to give Kai Er a suitable cultivation method. Xiaoyan chuckled and shook his head. Immediately, under Zhu Chang's puzzled gaze, he smiled at Kai Er and asked, Kai Er, are you willing to take me as your master? Translator. Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios. Chapter 961. Acknowledge me as your master? Xiaoyan's words were like a clap of thunder that exploded in the ears of the 2 people in front of him. Kai Er's delicate little face could not help but reveal a flattered expression. As for Zhu Chang, the latter felt even more disbelief in his heart. He did not expect that Xiaoyan would actually want to accept Kai Er as his disciple. Although Xiaoyan was young, his cultivation was already comparable to the ancestor-level figures of some ancient factions. Once he was willing to accept Kai Er as his disciple, it would undoubtedly be of great benefit to the latter's future. At the very least, it would definitely be much better than cooped up in this small mountain village. However, the only thing that Zhu Chang could not bear was that once she acknowledged him as her master, it would also mean that Kai Er would have to leave his side. Although he was reluctant, Zhu Chang also understood that this was ultimately for Kai Er's sake. After all, if Kai Er continued to stay in the Zhu clan's village, not only would she not be able to step into the threshold of cultivation, but she would also have to live in fear of those experts spying on her. In the long run, this was ultimately not a solution. Senior, if I acknowledge you as my master, can you not take me with you? Although Kai Er was not well versed in worldly affairs, she understood some of the rules of the continent. Generally speaking, when some powerful seniors accepted a disciple halfway through their journey, they would usually take the disciple along with them to prevent the latter from being lazy in cultivation. At the same time, it was also to provide the disciple with a good cultivation environment and convenient protection. However, Kai Er's heart was also unable to let go of her brother Zhu Chang. The 2 of them had relied on each other for survival since young, and neither of them could leave the other. She really could not bear to leave with Xiaoyan. Hearing Kai Er's words, the expression on Zhu Chang's face suddenly changed. Of course, he knew the reason why Kai Er said this. However, this matter was related to Kai Er's life and fate, and he could not allow her to do this. Once she made Xiaoyan unhappy, the matter of accepting her as a disciple would be dropped. Wouldn't this be a waste of such a good opportunity? Senior Kai Er is still young and there are many things that she does not know. Her words just now, Haha, that's enough. You don't have to say any more. Before Zhu Chang finished speaking, Xiaoyan chuckled and spoke. However, these words caused Zhu Chang's heart to instantly fall to the bottom. Although Zhu Chang's laughter was still amiable, these words clearly meant that he was looking for an excuse. Did this mean that Xiaoyan did not want to accept Kai as his disciple? Hearing Xiaoyan's words, Kai of Zhu Chang's heart, and she was at a loss. Of course, her appearance and her pitiful appearance. Of course, because of some reasons, I will only bring her trouble. If I bring her, of her, of course, of her, of course, of the, of her, of herses. If I bring her, I, of the, of Zhu, s of them. Of Zhu, of them. Of. Thank you, elder. Recovering from her shock, Kai was overjoyed. She hurriedly bowed to Xiaoyan. The latter looked at her with a strange expression, and did not reply. Zhu Chang, on the other hand, hurriedly hinted at Kai. Only then did Kai recover from her shock and quickly change her words. Thank you, master. Thank you, elder. Xiaoyan nodded his head with satisfaction. Immediately, his tone changed as he opened his mouth once again and said, Although you are now my disciple, you are only a disciple in name. I have very high requirements for my disciples. If you want to become my disciple, you must show me enough strength. Do you understand, Kai? As soon as these words came out, Kai's expression changed slightly. She could not help but feel a little nervous. She had not even stepped through the threshold of cultivation. So how could she possess strength? In this regard, Zhu Chang's face showed a smile of admiration. His eyes were fixed on Xiaoyan, and a feeling of admiration emerged in his heart. Xiaoyan's words sounded like a kind of pressure to Kai. But in his ears, it was a kind of encouragement. As a disciple, which disciple did not want their master to be proud of them? In order to achieve this, one must put in effort. However, Xiaoyan added a point on the premise of pride, and that was to become an inner disciple. To become the pride of one's master, this path was bound to be filled with great difficulties. There would always be people who could not endure and would give up halfway. However, if one only wanted to become an inner disciple, the requirements would be much lower. This would also increase Kai's desire to work harder. Master, what kind of cultivation does one need to become your inner disciple? The girl's pretty face showed some expectation. She only hoped that Xiaoyan's requirements were not too high. Otherwise, she would still worry about whether she could achieve it. Xiaoyan pursed his mouth and smiled when he heard this. He said with a smile, Well, work hard on your cultivation. Kai, when you meet the requirements to become my inner disciple, I will come to see you again. Immediately after, without waiting for Kai to speak, Xiaoyan flipped his hand and an ancient scroll appeared in his palm. This is for you. He extended his hand and handed the scroll to Kai. After the latter expressed her thanks, Xiaoyan continued. I see that your attribute is wood, so this wood amplification art should be the most suitable for you. In addition, its previous owner was a source ancestor level expert. Xiaoyan smiled. His words were referring to He Mu. This wood amplification art was the qi method that He Mu had practiced. It was a high-level spirit qi method. Once mastered, it would be comparable to an intent qi method. A wood-type qi method that could be used by the spiritual ginseng tribe to practice was naturally one of the top wood-type qi methods. When they heard Xiaoyan's words, not only Kai, but even Zhu Chang could not help but reveal a shocked expression. Being able to create a source ancestor level expert, just this point alone was enough to prove the strength of this qi method. After that, Xiaoyan flipped his wrist and handed over a storage ring to Kai. There were quite a number of wood-type do techniques within it. From the heaven type to the spirit type, there were more than 10 types altogether. In addition, there were also quite a number of spirit stones for Kai to use for training. In fact, Xiaoyan even took out one of the 4 high-level spirit stones in his hand to help Kai with her training. Quickly following this, Xiaoyan gave some instructions before leading the 2 of them out of the deep regions of the cave as though nothing had happened. The villagers within the cave also carried respectful gazes as they watched the few of them leave. After the 3 of them left the cave, Kai turned around and glanced at the two old men who had yet to come out. Only then did she curiously raise her head to look at Xiao Yan and softly asked, "Teacher, this disciple still does not know your name?" Xiao Yan. Mobile version update website. Chapter 962. In front of the Zhu family village. Xiao Yan looked at the people in front of him. His gaze swept over his new disciple, and he could not help but feel a little melancholy. Take good care of her. Xiao Yan stared at Zhu Chang and gave him a forward warning. Zhu Chang nodded heavily. Even if Xiao Yan did not say it, he would definitely take good care of Kai. Then Xiao Yan's gaze fell on Kai. Girl, remember what I told you. I hope that the next time we meet, you can bring me enough surprises. The girl nodded with determination in her eyes. Whether it was for herself or to satisfy her master, she would do her best to become stronger as soon as possible. After giving a few words of advice, Xiao Yan moved and left the place under the gazes of Zhu Chang and Kai. Now it was time for him to find the answer. He had to understand where he was now before making any plans. After leaving the territory of the Zhu family village, Xiao Yan was still in a barren land. Looking into the distance, there was a dense mountain range at the end of his line of sight. However, Xiao Yan's current goal was not to find the mountain range, but to find a human city. Only there would Xiao Yan be able to understand his current situation. Little fellow, are you really at ease leaving that girl in the village? Suddenly, Xiao Xian's voice sounded in Xiao Yan's mind. Hearing this, Xiao Yan helplessly curled his lips and said, "What can I do?" Then what can I do? Do I really have to bring her along? I already have enough things on my own. If I bring Kai along before solving those problems, it will only harm her for no reason. It's the illusory spirit pupil. I'm afraid that even those inhuman fellows from the Ghost Manor will make a move for her. What's more, they want to capture me, so I can't bring Kai along. Ghost Hall? What's that? Because he had been in a deep sleep, Xiao Xian did not know anything about the outside world. Naturally, he did not know anything about the so-called Ghost Hall. Then, Xiao Yan roughly told Xiao Xian about what had happened after he came to the Yuanwu continent. You're saying that the girl from the ancient clan was taken away by them. After Xiao Yan's general explanation, Xiao Xian had gained quite a good understanding of the Yuanwu continent. In addition, he had the spirit origin source inheritance of Tianju, so he omitted most of the irrelevant information. However, when he mentioned that Sun Air had been captured by the Ghost Hall, Xiao Xian's heart could not help but fluctuate intensely. He naturally had quite an impression of Sun Air. She was the Gu clan's genius, Gu Yuan's daughter, and Xiao Yan's wife. No matter which point it was enough to move him. Xiao Yan's emotions involuntarily became a little violent when this matter was mentioned. The aura within his body involuntarily churned. Enormous dou qi overflowed from his body and shattered the invisible space with a bang. However, in the end, Xiao Yan forcefully suppressed the fury in his heart. He also knew that now was not the time to be angry. The truth still required him to use his strength to uncover it. Before that, being angry would not solve any problems. Moreover, that group of people had clearly come for the Tushi ancient god's jade, just like the Hun clan back then. Xiao Yan believed that as long as he had the ancient jade in his hand, they would not dare to do anything to Sun Air. I also don't know why Sun Air would actually appear in their prison. Furthermore, the Ghost Palace seems to be very familiar with me. They know every single one of my methods like the back of their hand. It's as if I've always been under their surveillance. Xiao Yan sighed deeply. His emotions were complicated. No matter how he thought about it, he could not understand why they were so clear about him. From the way I see it, their understanding of you should be limited to the Dou Qi continent. After all, if they were really monitoring you at all times, it is likely that you would have already fallen into their hands. Moreover, from what you have said, the speed of your growth and fighting strength in the western region during these years is also beyond their expectations. The advantage that they originally possessed is gradually no longer present. The current you is also an unknown to them. Haha, it is often the unknown that is the most frightening. Xiao Xian laughed softly. Although he had yet to truly meet anyone from the Ghost Hall, this feeling caused him to feel a sense of déjà vu. In other words, it was a feeling of reunion after a long time. Hall of Souls. Xiao Xian's tone was a little deep. He and Xiao Yan spoke the two words in unison. It was really difficult for them to not recall the former when they had such a similar faction background. While the two of them were conversing, Xiao Yan was finally able to clearly see the mountain range in front of him. Amidst the mountains and forests, there was actually a huge city built here. Xiao Yan's heart immediately rejoiced when he saw this ancient city. It was likely that he would be able to find out his current geographical location once he entered this place. Very quickly, Xiao Yan arrived in front of this city. His body slowly descended and landed at the entrance of the city. At this moment, there was a large number of people entering and exiting the city. Xiao Yan smiled slightly. He followed the flow of people and swiftly entered the city after paying a low-grade spirit stone as the entrance fee. As soon as he passed through the entrance of the city, Xiao Yan could see with a single glance that in the depths of the city, there was a huge ancient castle at the other end. It stood in the city like an imperial city. Everyone who saw the ancient castle could not help but cast a respectful gaze at it. Of course, there was no lack of fear among them. However, in comparison, those people's gazes were much more obscure. Xiao Yan only glanced at it curiously. He did not pay too much attention to it and walked straight into the city. At the same time, his ears carefully listened to the conversations of the people coming and going. Very quickly, Xiao Yan obtained the most important information about himself. Northern region. This is actually the northern region. Xiao Yan was shocked. He had never imagined that esteemed Tianju's teleportation array would actually be a teleportation array from a province. It had directly teleported him and Xiao Xian to the northern region. Although he was shocked, Xiao Yan quickly calmed down. Since he was already here, he might as well take things as they came. Moreover, the northern region was one of his destinations. He still clearly remembered that Guyu had once told him that Hai Machin, the original body of the sea heart flame, was in the northern region. Moreover, the latter had established Beihai College in the northern region. This time, Xiao Yan immediately found his next target. Hai Machin. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. However, just as Xiao Yan was deep in thought, a couple of human figures suddenly attacked. The figures that were originally about to rush over Xiao Yan's head suddenly paused in the next moment. Soon after, they moved their own bodies and surrounded Xiao Yan on both sides of the street. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor, Atlas Studios. Chapter 963. The scene that had suddenly appeared on the street immediately attracted the attention of quite a number of passers-by. Numerous gazes carried shock and pity as they looked at the black-robed young man who was currently surrounded by the 5 people. At the same time, a middle-aged man among the 5 people also looked at the black-robed man in front of him with a ferocious gaze. His face was ferocious as he spoke with hatred. "Brat, you did not expect that we would meet again so soon, did you?" This middle-aged man who had shouted was one of the 9-star bandits who had been forced back by Xiao Yan's words earlier. However, compared to earlier, the frightened expression on his face was no longer present when he faced Xiao Yan. Instead, there was a cold smile. Wei Ran's fearless manner appeared to possess some courage. This was all thanks to the other 4 old men surrounding Xiao Yan at this moment. These 4 old men were surprisingly all elite Dodi. The strongest among the 4 Dodi had already reached the level of a 4-star Dodi while the weakest was an advanced 1-star Dodi. This kind of lineup could be considered extremely powerful. If it was placed in some second-tier faction, for elite Dodi could be considered the core strength of the faction. However, in this place, there were 4 elite Dodi in this city. Just this point alone was enough to explain the prosperity of this northern region. A place where the strong gathered would definitely be a prosperous place. This principle was applicable no matter where one was. Xiao Yan slowly recovered in the face of the cry of the middle-aged man. He raised his eyes and looked at the few people around him with a strange expression. It was as though he had not noticed the appearance of these 5 people. The expression of the middle-aged man immediately turned green when he sensed this. His eyes were filled with hatred as he looked at Xiao Yan. However, he was ignored by the latter. "The few of you. I don't seem to have met all of you before. May I know what the meaning of this is?" Xiao Yan ignored the middle-aged man, and threw his gaze toward the 4-star Dodi among the 4. His voice was calm as he asked, "Brat, you killed Peng Lu earlier. Now you actually want to act." Bang. The old man did not open his mouth, but the middle-aged man's face was filled with fury as he roared at Xiaoyan. However, before the words from his mouth sounded, Xiaoyan randomly raised his hand. The middle-aged man's body immediately flew back uncontrollably. He appeared just like a broken sack as he heavily smashed onto the end of the street. Noisy. Xiaoyan spoke in an indifferent manner. Soon after, his eyes rotated and the expression in his dark black eyes suddenly became indifferent. Both of his eyes stared at an old man in a brocade robe in front of him. His voice sank as he said, "What are you talking about?" "Do-di old man." "Do-di. Of a person." The old man's expression immediately became somewhat ugly when he saw that Xiaoyan had actually sent the middle-aged man flying with one strike in front of him. The gaze he used to stare at Xiaoyan had also become increasingly cold. Of him. Xiaoyan's eyes were still indifferent. His expression did not change because of the old man's tone. The old man's face immediately became gloomy when he saw that Xiaoyan was indifferent. He, a 4-star Do-di, was actually ignored by a little brat. Moreover, it was in public. How could he endure this? The old man let out a cold snort. His body shook and the do-chi in his body began to circulate within his veins. It is really the case that a newborn calf is not afraid of a tiger. You are so powerful and overbearing just because you have some cultivation. Brat, the old me does not care who you are today. You have killed an outer court deacon of my northern wasteland hall. Now you have injured the strong people of my hall. You must pay the price for what you have done today. With an explosive cry, the old man's body immediately charged forward. He waved his large sleeve and surging do-chi immediately spluttered out from his palm. In the blink of an eye, it agglomerated into a long halberd. He waved both of his arms and pierced it toward Xiaoyan's body. At the same time, the other 3 old men also released the do-chi in their bodies and charged toward Xiaoyan. Xiaoyan clenched his hand in the air when he saw the 4 people step forward. A completely black-colored heavy xian ruler immediately appeared in his hand. He flipped his hand and turned it around. First, he lifted the long halberd that was piercing toward him from bottom to top. Soon after, he swept the huge ruler horizontally and forced back the 3 old men who had entered his attack range. The 4 of them retreated several feet. When they stabilized their bodies, they once again stepped into the air. Powerful do-chi spluttered out from the soles of their feet. Their bodies borrowed the force and once again charged toward Xiaoyan. Powerful do skills swiftly agglomerated in the hands of the 4 elite do-di. A ferocious aura immediately spread. From the looks of it, if an ordinary elite do-di were to face such a situation, it was likely that he would end up seriously injured even if he did not die. In this regard, Xiaoyan's face revealed a stern expression. If it was not because of Kai Air, perhaps he would have forced the issue and settled the matter peacefully. However, if he did not want these fellows' attention to be overly focused on the Zhu clan, he could only step forward himself and divert their attention. This time around, if he had not been discovered by these fellows, it was likely that these few people would have already appeared in the Zhu clan. Then Kai Air would be in danger. The people from the Zhu clan did not know about Kai Air's illusionary spirit pupils. However, this did not mean that the dead man would not be able to recognize it. Once Kai Air was recognized, it was likely that she would face unavoidable trouble. This was something that Xiaoyan was most unwilling to see. Holding the huge ruler in his hand, Xiaoyan's eyes were sharp as he watched the 4 people charging toward him once again. The do-chi in his body slowly circulated. The hand that held the huge ruler also increased its strength. Bang! In the next moment, Xiaoyan, who was standing on the ground, suddenly disappeared. The ground under his feet was instantly shattered into fine powder by a huge force. Almost at the same time, the thick and heavy xian heavy ruler ruthlessly smashed into the body of one of the 4 people. Poochie! Fresh blood splattered. The body of the old man could not help but fly backwards. The embroidered robe in front of his chest was shattered by the huge force. The huge ruler directly left an inch-deep mark on his chest. Xiaoyan's body did not hesitate even a little after finishing off this old man with one strike. His body flashed, and he was just like a ghost as he left behind a solidified afterimage. By the time the afterimage scattered, the ground of the street was in ruins. The 2 sides of the street were already empty. 2 deep gullies covered the entire street. The crowd was silent. When one looked at the battleground again, it was only the 4-star Dodi who was still standing in the blink of an eye. A mere 1-star Dodi. It is fine if I kill him. Forget about that Pang Lu. No one can even stop me if I want to kill you. The old man was caught off guard and was easily grabbed by the throat by Xiaoyan from the front. Xiaoyan raised his arm slightly and lifted the old man up. The words from his mouth caused the old man's heart to be extremely frightened. His originally frightened face had become completely pale at this moment. Manager, save me. Sensing the cold killing intent that seeped out from Xiaoyan's eyes, the old man's heart was immediately shocked. Only then did he understand that the strength of the person in front of him actually far surpassed him. No wonder he was so fearless earlier. When the hoarse roar was emitted from the old man's mouth, Xiaoyan merely laughed coldly. His body turned and looked at the deepest part of the street. At this moment, there was a powerful aura spreading out from the ancient castle. A human figure immediately charged out. His target was Xiaoyan. This mister, the matter earlier might have been a misunderstanding. May I know if you can stop and let us sit down and have a chat? The cry was transmitted over. At the same time, a powerful aura that belonged to a 7-star peak advanced Dodi charged toward Xiaoyan. Oh, do you want me to release him? Xiaoyan laughed coldly. Immediately, the hand that he used to grab the old man loosened. At the same time, the old man's body fell from the midair uncontrollably. Soon after, however, the 7-star Dodi's heart had just sighed in relief. Bang! Xiaoyan's right leg was suddenly raised. A whip leg heavily smashed into the old man's chest. Chapter 964. The sudden change in the arena caused the expression of the 7-star Dodi to change. His lightning-like body had no choice but to slow down. He waved his sleeve and an invisible strength swept out, stopping the old man's flying body. At this moment, the latter was already seriously injured. Xiaoyan's attack had not only broken the ribs in front of his chest, but it had also shaken and injured the qi paths within his body. It was likely that he would not be able to recover within the next 1 to 2 months. Brat, I am trying to persuade you nicely, yet you actually want to attack. The expression of the 7-star Dodi immediately became gloomy after carefully inspecting the injuries within the old man's body. A pair of shady old eyes stared intently at Xiaoyan. There was a deep fury surging within his eyes. Persuade me nicely? You are merely afraid that I will take his life at any moment after seeing that he is in my hands. That is why you are holding back. The face of the 7-star Dodi alternated between green and white after being exposed by Xiaoyan. No matter what, you have repeatedly injured the people of my northern wasteland hall today. You should at least give me an explanation. Although he wished that he could attack and capture the person in front of him, the 7-star Dodi was not a stupid person. From Xiaoyan's attack earlier, he could sense that the latter's strength was likely not inferior to his own. It was the first time that he had seen such a young 7-star Dodi. This caused him to feel even more afraid of the latter. Explanation? I can't bear to see your overbearing manner. Does that count? Xiaoyan sneered as he mocked. Brat, since when did a brat like you have the right to meddle in the affairs of the North Wilderness Palace? If you can bring out a powerful background that can make the North Wilderness Palace wary of you, I'll take it lying down. There is no need to probe. Relax, I am alone and do not have any faction backing me. Therefore, you need not worry. If you wish to attack, feel free to do so. Hearing this, Xiaoyan smiled. His pitch-black eyes stared at the former, as if he had already seen through the latter's thoughts. Xiaoyan's words had just sounded when the surrounding passers-by watching the battle immediately erupted into laughter. The corner of that 7-star Dodi's mouth involuntarily twitched in the face of this ridiculing laughter. A killing intent surged within his eyes. Arrogant brat! Let me see just how capable you are. High up in the sky, a figure flashed rapidly. In the blink of an eye, he was already in front of Xiaoyan. He raised his right leg and twisted his body in midair. His right leg carried a fierce gust of wind as it directly tore through the void and fiercely swung down at Xiaoyan's head. A powerful force arrived in an instant, as if it wanted to take a person's life with a single blow. It was incomparably overbearing and ruthless. The sudden appearance of this scene also caused the surrounding crowd to emit an exclamation. Even some of the elite Dodi's faces also revealed a deep solemnness. Although the old man appeared to be very old, he was after all a 7-star Dodi. His strength was shocking. Once he attacked, his aura could be said to be world-shocking. Xiao Yan's expression was as calm as usual in the face of this extremely fierce and sudden attack from the old man. Even his eyelids did not twitch. He rotated his right hand and waved his large sleeve. Immediately, he swung it forward gently. His actions were gentle and calm. However, in the blink of an eye, the attacks of the two collided heavily together. Immediately, a low and deep explosion sounded. Turbulent energy ripples immediately swept in all directions from the point of collision. The powerful force instantly destroyed the shops on both sides. Everything within the shops was also turned into ashes. The hands and feet separated upon contact. Xiao Yan's body did not move even a little as he stood in the same spot. Even the black robe that he was wearing did not flutter even a little. On the other hand, that 7-star Dodi staggered back over 10 steps before his body came to a miserable stop. In just a short exchange of blows, the difference in strength between the two was fully displayed. The old man's shady old eyes were suddenly lifted the instant his body came to a stop. His shocked gaze stared intently at Xiao Yan. His heart was filled with shock. 8-star Dodi. At this moment, everyone present was staring at the news with shocked eyes. Their faces were filled with disbelief. There were naturally quite a number of 8-star Dodi in this vast northern region. However, there were very few who were as young as Xiao Yan in front of them. Moreover, in their impression, they had never seen such a person in any faction. At this moment, the person who was the most shocked was naturally the 7-star Dodi who had exchanged blows with Xiao Yan a moment ago. He had originally thought that even if Xiao Yan's cultivation was not weak, there would at most be a gap between them. However, the latter's strength was actually much stronger than he had imagined. 8-star Dodi. With such a cultivation, his position was not low even in the Northern Wasteland Hall. However, the young man in front of him was actually an 8 immortal Dodi. This was really hard to imagine. After this matter, I must report the cultivation and characteristics of this person in front of me to my superiors. The old man secretly thought in his heart. When he looked at Xiao Yan, his gaze involuntarily lowered. Perhaps this was the deterrence that came with the strong. As long as one displayed their strength, even the toughest bones would soften. Do you still have any questions about me? Sensing the change in the old man's gaze, Xiao Yan coldly smiled in his heart. He had seen too many people with such gazes. They always liked to judge people by their appearance. When a real blow came, they did not dare to believe it. Only by being suppressed time and time again could they be completely awakened. A cough cough. Mister, I admit that what happened today was indeed our fault. A person with such a bad temperament should not exist in our Northern Wasteland Hall. Mister's actions have helped us remove a malignant tumor. I have offended you by attacking just now. I hope that you can be magnanimous enough to forgive me. The old man cupped his hands toward Xiao Yan with an embarrassed face. At the same time that he bowed, his old face had turned purple. Even he did not dare to believe the words that he had said. However, in order to avoid the trouble in front of him, he had no choice but to admit defeat. As for the matter of settling the debt in the future, as long as he found out the identity of this black-robed young man in front of him, he would settle the new and old debts together. Xiao Yan was naturally too lazy to bother with the thoughts of this old man. If it was possible, he would definitely not be willing to offend the local tyrant of this place. The reason why he had repeatedly attacked them was because he hoped to shift their attention away from the matter of the Zhu clan village. As for himself, Xiao Yan would not be afraid as long as the one who came was not an origin transformation expert. Chapter 965. Holding the map in his hand, Xiao Yan faced north and continued on his journey. The 7-star Dodi in the city had been killed by one punch from Xiao Yan. Xiao Yan had randomly found a map of the northern region, identified the direction, and headed north. Gu had once said that Hai Machin had founded Beihai College. The college was built in the northernmost part of the northern region, the boundless northern sea. Xiao Yan was currently heading toward that place. However, after carefully looking at the map, Xiao Yan frowned and realized that the so-called Northern Desolate Hall was also on his way to the Northern Sea. Moreover, It seemed that it was a place that he had to pass through. Anyone who wanted to enter the Northern Sea would have to pass by the Northern Desolate Hall. At the same time that the 7-star Dodi had died, the largest faction in the Northern Desolate region, the Northern Desolate Hall, was located on a tall mountain peak that pierced through the clouds in the northern region's Northern Desolate Mountain. The peak of the Northern Desolate Mountain seemed to have been cut off by a huge axe, leaving behind a flat cross-section. Large buildings towered into the clouds above. One could vaguely see a part of the buildings that were revealed through the clouds. That was the main hall of the Northern Desolate Hall. Usually there were meetings in the hall. It was also where the hall master sat. At this moment, an old man in a yellow robe was half kneeling in the main hall. His head was lowered and his hands were raised. There was a broken jade tablet between his hands. Hall master, just a moment ago, Elder Lee's soul tablet was completely broken. There was a huge throne in the hall. There were many carvings of demonic beasts on it. They were so lifelike that they appeared quite domineering. However, there was not a single person on the throne at this moment. Even so, the old man below did not dare to be careless. He respectfully explained what had happened. Do you still need to report such a matter to me? He is merely a 7-star Dodi. It is fine if he dies, however, his death is a small matter. The dignity of my Northern Wasteland Hall cannot be offended. Go and order the Eastern, Southern, and Western Hall chiefs to find the person who killed someone. I want him to know that the people of my Northern Wasteland Hall are not people who can be casually killed. A voice that was filled with majesty resounded within the hall. Although it was impossible to identify where the person who spoke was, the old man who was half kneeling below the stage still responded with a yes. Immediately, his body slowly distorted and disappeared from the hall in the blink of an eye. Following the disappearance of the old man, the large hall once again became quiet. A long while later, the empty throne suddenly became distorted. Soon after, a middle-aged man in a brocade robe slowly appeared. He slowly clenched his open palm, and a huge amount of energy flowed into the middle-aged man's body. The powerful energy vibrated, and the entire hall trembled. How many years has it been? How many years has it been since someone dared to touch my northern wilderness palace in the northern region? In the blink of an eye, a week had already passed. Xiaoyan was seated cross-legged at the top of a cliff. The 9 avatars were also seated around him. The 9 avatars were each absorbing the energy within 3 high-grade spirit stones. Within a short few days, the cultivation of the 9 avatars had already broken through to the advanced 5-star Dodi class. Such a frightening speed was many times faster than in the past. Moreover, this was all thanks to the effect of the high-grade spirit stones. A long while later, the seated Xiaoyan's body trembled slightly. His tightly shut eyes were opened. A thought passed through his mind, and the 9 avatars returned to their original bodies. At the same time, the 3 high-grade spirit stones were once again returned to Xiaoyan's storage ring. Soon after, the empty space beside him slowly distorted, and Xiaoxian's figure appeared. Cuckoo, little fellow, this 9 transformation body skill of yours is really mysterious. It can raise the cultivation of the 9 avatars to the advanced 5-star Dodi class. This kind of lineup is comparable to a high-grade sect. After praising and ridiculing, the grandfather and grandson looked at each other and smiled. The atmosphere immediately became much more relaxed. After the two of them chatted for a while, Xiaoyan's gaze returned to Xiaoxian's illusionary body. His heart involuntarily moved. Ancestor, I saw you block old Luo's spiritual strength in one strike in the ancient tomb earlier. May I know what your current spiritual strength is? Some curiosity surfaced on Xiaoyan's face as he spoke. Perhaps it was because Xiaoxian had just awakened, but his spiritual strength was still in an unstable state. This caused Xiaoyan to be unable to probe. Hence, he could only directly ask. Xiaoxian mused for a moment after hearing this. Only then did he smile faintly and say, if I am not wrong, it should be comparable to a rank 5 spiritual strength on the origin martial continent. Xiaoyan was immediately shocked when he heard Xiaoxian's reply. However, he understood after thinking about it. Guru Tianju was a returnance expert after all, and Xiaoxian had obtained the inheritance of his spiritual origin. It was normal for Xiaoxian to have such an outcome. Although he still felt a little emotional, It did not affect the overall situation. "Oh right, ancestor, since your spiritual origin has completely recovered, may I ask if your body can be recovered as well?" A gleam of light flashed through Xiao Yan's eyes as he changed the topic. Xiao Xian shook his head with a bitter smile and said, "You're thinking too much. You're thinking too simply. Although my soul origin has been fully recovered, the gap between my soul strength and my cultivation base is too great. Ordinary refining methods can't refine a body that can accommodate my soul strength. Therefore, if I want to refine a body, I'm afraid I'll need a body that can at least withstand my soul strength of the 5th step. A body that can withstand Class 5 spiritual strength. Doesn't that mean that it has to be the body of an origin transformation expert at the very least?" Xiao Yan's eyes hardened. He could not help but feel a sense of seriousness in his heart. His current fighting strength was comparable to a 9-star Dodi, but the difference between him and a true origin transformation expert was like the distance between heaven and earth. Even though this was the case, Xiao Yan's heart did not feel even a little discouraged. Back then, Yao Lao had also been in a similar predicament. In the end, he had still managed to recover his physical body and become an elite dosheng. Xiao Yan believed that Xiao Xian in front of him would also have such a day. If he could do the same thing once, he would be able to do it a second time. Other than the problem of a body, Xiao Yan naturally understood that he would need other high-tier medicinal pills and other ingredients as support. At the very least, Xiao Yan did not need to worry about those things for now. Before he found a suitable body, he still had a lot of time to search for those ingredients. As for now, the most important thing was to hurry to the Northern Sea and find Haimachan. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor, Atlas Studios. Chapter 966. Haha, little guy. Other than the rank 5 soul realm, I have another thing to tell you. Xiao Yan and Xiao Xian were flying side by side in the void. Suddenly, the latter smiled mockingly and stopped in midair. Xiao Yan frowned. A curious expression appeared on his face. Ancestor, what do you mean? This? Xiao Xian smiled and extended 2 fingers. At the same time, a huge amount of soul power surged and rapidly gathered at his fingertips, releasing a dazzling golden light. This is... Xiao Yan was shocked when he saw this scene. He immediately thought of something when he picked up the golden light. Could it be? Xiao Xian extended his finger and randomly drew in the empty space while Xiao Yan was guessing in shock in his heart. After merely a few strokes, he waved his hand and the golden light seal that was agglomerated instantly shot forward. It collided with a distant mountain with a speed that seemed to chase the stars and the moon. Bang! There was an explosive sound. At the same time, Xiao Yan was shocked to see that the entire mountain peak had been blasted apart by the light seal. Hiss! Xiao Yan could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. His face was filled with shock and amazement. He did not expect Xiao Xian to be able to condense a formation. Ancestor, you. Haha, this is all thanks to Tianju's inheritance. In addition to all his soul origin energy, I have also inherited his identity as an array master. This may also be due to my Doqi attribute. In short, I am now an array master. Haha. At the end, even Xiao Xian himself was pleasantly surprised. After receiving Tianju's inheritance and listening to Xiao Yan's explanation, he had some understanding of the path of an array master. The existence of an array master in the origin martial continent was not inferior to an alchemist. However, the 2 paths were different, and the former was more difficult, causing the path of an array master to gradually decline. However, the path of cultivation was different. This was the rule of the continent. Xiao Xian had obtained the inheritance of Tianju's soul origin energy, so he was destined to become a formation master. In the future, Xiao Xian would definitely go further and further on this path. He would accomplish what Tianju had failed to do, or even surpass him. Subsequently, the grandfather and grandson laughed and chatted for a while. After Xiao Xian withdrew his soul power, he once again moved and quickly flew toward the north. The Northern Wilderness Palace was located in the Northern Wilderness. There were a total of 4 palace masters in the palace. The Grand Palace Master was located in the main palace, which was the Northern Mountain. The other 3 palace masters each occupied one side of the palace. Other than the main palace, the other 3 palaces were called the East, South, and West Palaces respectively. Feng City, Feng City was an extremely large city in the northern region. Although it was not the largest city in the entire northern region, it could be considered one of the top 10 cities. This was because of its geographical location. Feng City faced the eastern hall of the Northern Wilderness Hall to the north. Although the distance was rather far, the two existed on the same latitude. It was also because of this that Feng City and the four halls of the Northern Wilderness Hall cleverly formed a X shape. Today was the day to enter the Obsidian Tower that occurred once every 5 years in Feng City. Until today, half a month had passed since Xiao Yan had left the Zhu clan village. Walking in Feng City, Xiao Yan's gaze casually swept across the crowd. His loose black robe flowed freely in the crowd like water. Xiao Yan easily arrived at the center of the city. This place was a huge plaza. An enormous black-colored stone tower stood in the middle of the open ground. A countless number of people crowded around it. Xiao Yan's gaze passed through the crowd, and could clearly see that there was a large empty space in front of this black-colored stone tower. Other than that place, the entire city seemed to have been filled with people. In that empty space, Xiao Yan could clearly see the figures of 3 people. They were middle-aged men wearing brocade robes with the word desolate embroidered on their backs. These 3 people were from the Northern Wilderness Hall. Xiao Yan's gaze flickered, but his heart did not stir much. 3 late 9-star Dodi. One of them had even reached the peak of the late 9-star Dodi. This kind of cultivation could be considered the strongest in this place. At this moment, their gazes were tightly locked on the black stone tower in front of them. Deep within their eyes, there was a fiery glow. Xiao Yan had already been in the city for nearly 2 hours. During this period of time, he had heard quite a number of things related to this black bright tower. After hearing these news, even his heart could not help but be moved. This obsidian tower actually had the ability to raise the cultivation of Dodi's elite. Just this point alone was enough to make him excited. Cultivation. This had always been the problem that Xiao Yan was most concerned about. Only with great strength would he be able to freely traverse the continent, rescue Sun Air, and reunite with his wife. Now that he had such an opportunity, he naturally would not easily miss it. Even though the destination of this trip was the Northern Sea, it was not important to stop for a short period of time on the way. Moreover, if he could use this time to raise his cultivation, Xiao Yan would naturally be more than happy to do so. According to the people around him, the Obsidian Tower contained the souls of many powerful magical beasts from the ancient times. However, after the passage of time, these souls no longer possessed their original strength. Even if they inherited their innate tyrannical and murderous nature, the damage they could do to humans was no longer as great as before. In the long river of time, due to the Obsidian Tower, the remnant spirits of these magical beasts had actually merged and absorbed the energy between heaven and earth. Finally, they had become a completely new energy body. The natural energy contained within these energy bodies was especially large. If one was able to absorb it, even an elite Dodi's strength would similarly increase. This was especially so after many Dodi had broken through their cultivation in the Obsidian Tower. This caused the Obsidian Tower to attract even more Dodi's attention. It was also because of this that the scene of today appeared in Feng City. If I can enter the Obsidian Tower this time, perhaps my cultivation will be able to take another step forward. If that's the case, perhaps with my own strength, I will be able to fight a mid-9-star Dodi without being at a disadvantage. Looking at the tall obsidian tower in front of him, Xiao Yan's heart became increasingly fiery. Dopa Reincarnated Flame Emperor. Chapter 967. Rumble. The enormous obsidian tower in Feng City suddenly began to shake. The thick black stone door slowly opened with a rumbling sound. Everyone present threw their fiery hot gazes over. After the door of the obsidian tower was completely opened, the enormous human wave immediately roared and charged forward. Their target was the obsidian tower in the middle of the square. The roar was like thunder, shaking the sky and the earth. The black mass of human flow was like a large dark cloud as it surged forward. At this moment, the 3 middle-aged men in front of the obsidian tower exchanged glances with each other and parted their mouths to smile. Cuckoo Eastern Hall Master, I remember that you have obtained the greatest benefit among the 3 of us in the Obsidian Tower the last time. How is it? You are about to reach the peak of the advanced 9-star Do-D class, right? The person in the middle of the three smiled. He looked at the tall and sturdy middle-aged man on his right. His eyes contained a mocking expression. Although the three of them were all subordinates of the Northern Wasteland Hall, they had their own conflicts with each other. The main hall would not stop or interfere with this kind of conflict. It was also because of this that the Northern Wasteland Hall was able to take such deep roots in the northern region. It was also because of this that the foundation of the Northern Wasteland Hall was so strong. Hearing this, the Eastern Hall Master's expression was cold as he glanced at the middle-aged man. He coldly said, "Unlike you, Southern Hall Master, I'm afraid that you are planning to break through to the 8th level after entering the Obsidian Tower this time. As long as you can enter it, your cultivation might be able to leap to the Origin Transformation Realm. At that time, you will really become the number 2 of our Northern Wasteland Hall." Haha, since the Eastern Hall Master has said this, I will congratulate you here. I hope that you can successfully break through to the Origin Transformation Realm. At that time, you will need to help me. After the words from the Eastern Hall Master's mouth sounded, the middle-aged man with a scholarly appearance to the left of the Southern Hall Master cupped his hands toward the Eastern Hall Master. His face revealed a warm smile, and the words from his mouth contained some flattery. "Oh, since that is the case, I will borrow your auspicious words. Haha, Western Hall Master, please be rest assured. Once I break through to the Origin Transformation Realm, I will definitely lend you a hand. I hope that you can break through to the Origin Transformation Realm as soon as possible, so that you can properly control the northern region and strengthen our Northern Wasteland Hall." The South Hall Master laughed out loud. He glanced at the East Hall Master from the corner of his eye and sneered. Then he moved his body and charged toward the Obsidian Tower. The East Hall Master and the West Hall Master exchanged glances with each other. Their eyes were ice cold. Soon after, they moved and rushed towards the Obsidian Tower together. Within the crowd, Xiao Yan's body was like a snake that could not be stopped as he slithered forward. Following the flow of people, he quickly arrived at the entrance of the Obsidian Tower. Seeing the large amount of people entering, Xiao Yan's forward speed unknowingly increased. However, just as Xiao Yan charged into the Obsidian Tower, a huge force suddenly descended from above his head. His body, which was originally floating in midair, almost fell to the ground. Xiao Yan was slightly startled in his heart. Immediately after, he regained his senses. With a slight shake of his shoulders, he seemed to have shaken off that huge force. Raising his head to look at the huge stone hall in front of him, Xiao Yan's eyes revealed a shocked expression. Other than the powerful magical beast energy bodies within the Obsidian Tower, the most important thing was the Obsidian Tower itself. It possessed an extremely frightening suppressive ability. Even a strong Do-D would have difficulty moving within it. Although the pressure within the tower was frightening, the strength of the first level was far from enough to suppress Xiao Yan. The pressure here could at the very most cause some 2-star Do-D to be unable to resist. As long as one was a 3-star Do-D, one would be able to barely move within this place. Under this pressure, even if they did not kill those energy bodies, they would still be able to grow quite a lot. The ability of the obsidian stone itself was that it had an extraordinary condensing effect on Do-Chi. Hence, training within the Obsidian Tower would often be able to obtain great benefits. At this moment, there were already quite a number of low-class Do-D who had begun to crazily train within this place. The Obsidian Tower would only be open for 3 months. Hence, they needed to raise their cultivation to the greatest extent within this period of time. Otherwise, they could only slowly train and wait for another 5 years. However, compared to these people, Xiao Yan's target was clearly not the first level. A pair of dark black eyes swept across the interior of the large hall. Very quickly, Xiao Yan looked towards the deepest part of the large hall. At that spot, numerous human figures were swiftly running. In front of them, there was a row of wide stairs. That was the path that led to the second level. They watched as the group of people rushed up the stairs. But soon, other than a portion of the crowd, the speed at which most of them climbed up the stairs became slower and slower. In the end, they directly lay down on the stairs, gasping for breath with great difficulty. Their bodies were unable to move even an inch, and even moving a finger was difficult for them. As for the other portion of people, although the expression on their faces appeared to be a little strenuous, they still quickly rushed up to the second level. Xiaoyan looked over. Among those people, the weakest one had a 4-star Dodi's cultivation. From this, it could be seen that the pressure within the obsidian tower would soar with the rise of the level. The pressure of the second level was definitely something that even an ordinary 5-star Dodi would have difficulty resisting. Xiaoyan smiled slightly. He did not hesitate even a little as his toes pressed on the ground. Soon after, his body shot forward in a ghost-like manner. His wind-like speed immediately alerted the surrounding elite Dodi seated on the ground. Xiaoyan's body flashed in front of numerous surprised gazes. In the blink of an eye, he had already charged up the stairs. Buzz! A frightening pressure descended on Xiaoyan's head. However, Xiaoyan's body did not pause even a little as he charged forward, ignoring the frightening pressure. In the blink of an eye, his body had disappeared from the large hall of the first level. This fellow, who is he? He is actually able to ignore the pressure of the first level. Looking at his agility, it is likely that his cultivation has already reached that of an 8-star Dodi. Waves of discussions were emitted from the large hall of the first level after Xiaoyan's body disappeared. Their voices were filled with surprise. At the same time, Xiaoyan had also appeared on the second level of the stone tower. Xiaoyan's appearance had also attracted quite a number of gazes. This time around, Xiaoyan glanced over and saw quite a number of illusionary magical beasts floating in the air within the large hall. These fellows were of different sizes, but without exception, their bodies contained an extremely large amount of energy. However, Xiaoyan acted as though he did not hear this. His body shook slightly and removed the pressure that had landed on his shoulder. Soon after, his body moved and swiftly flew toward the stairs of the third level of the stone tower. Chapter 968. After passing through the first 4 levels of the stone tower, Xiaoyan's figure quickly appeared on the 5th level. At this point, most of the experts gathered in the hall were already 8-star Dodi. Other than 2 or 3 7-star Dodi who were sitting cross-legged in training, the other 8-star Dodi had pressure above their heads. They were each using their own methods to fight for the energy bodies of the magic beasts floating in the air. Explosive sounds of Doqi colliding continuously sounded from the hall. Human figures flew around. Occasionally, there would be energy bodies that were killed. Soon after, they would be held in someone's hand. Even though other people could not help but feel a burning desire in their hearts when they saw this, the strength of the people present was almost the same. It would be troublesome if they were to fight. Rather than fighting each other pointlessly, it was better to make use of the time to kill more of these energy bodies. Faced with the attacks of an 8-star Dodi in the battleground, those energy bodies would naturally not just stand there and allow themselves to be beaten. Faced with the pursuit of an 8-star Dodi, these energy bodies would dodge and do their best to retaliate. It was not impossible for some powerful energy bodies to turn around and suppress the human experts. Standing in front of the stairs, Xiaoyan's gaze passed through the continuously flashing crowd in front of him and landed on the stairs behind him. Just like before, there were also elite Dodi sitting cross-legged there with difficulty. Moreover, the cultivation of those people had generally reached 8-star Dodi. The strongest among them had even reached the level of a quasi-9-star Dodi. If even such a cultivation was suppressed here, one could imagine just how frightening the pressure contained in the 6th level was. Standing on the 5th level, the current Xiaoyan could already clearly feel the heavy pressure on his shoulders. Even though this was far from his ultimate limit, it was enough to cause people to feel shocked. Stomp! Xiaoyan's feet were slightly heavy as they stepped on the ground. Doqi gathered under his feet. Soon after, it was like a fountain that angrily spurted out. Doqi surged as Xiaoyan's body suddenly charged forward. His body was just like a shooting star. Any energy body that collided with him would explode in an instant wherever he passed. Only pieces of energy cores were left as they fell from the air. Soon after, they attracted a wild scramble from the 8-star Dodi present. Xiaoyan, on the other hand, had already reached the staircase leading to the 6th level in that short instant. His footsteps did not stop as he stomped heavily on the first step. His figure once again charged forward explosively, heading straight for the 6th level. On the stairs, The few elite Dodi's faces were filled with shock as they watched Xiaoyan climb to the 6th level without stopping. Their eyes were filled with disbelief. The 6th floor. When Xiaoyan's figure appeared on the 6th level of the stone tower, the number of people in the hall had decreased significantly. There were only 7 elite Dodi on this level. Moreover, all 7 of them were elite 9-star Dodi. The 3 hall chiefs of the Northern Wasteland Hall were also among them. At this moment, these 7 people were each standing in a corner of the hall. Other than 2 of them, the others were quietly sitting cross-legged on the ground. They quietly endured the frightening pressure that came from above their heads. Under the cover of this frightening pressure, they repeatedly condensed the Do Qi within their bodies. When one's cultivation had reached this level, it was impossible to rely solely on training to raise one's strength. Only by repeatedly condensing one's body and repeatedly condensing one's cultivation would one be able to achieve success. At this moment, other than the 2 people who were still fighting for the energy bodies, the other 5 people in the hall were all advanced 9-star Dodi. Therefore, such a scene had occurred in the hall. The few people in the hall did not make much of a move in the face of Xiaoyan's sudden appearance. They merely randomly glanced at the latter. After discovering that the person who had arrived was actually a young man, a different expression more or less surfaced in their eyes. However, that was all. After stepping into the 6th level, the frightening pressure that landed on Xiaoyan's shoulders became even more frightening. This time around, even Xiaoyan felt a little strenuous. Once again, he raised his gaze and looked at the stairs that led to the 7th level. Xiaoyan hesitated for a moment in his heart. He did indeed still have some strength left in this 6th level. However, if he were to forcefully charge into the 7th level, the result would be unknown to him. Xiaoyan hesitated for a moment in his heart. Finally, he withdrew the thought in his heart. He turned his gaze and looked at the energy bodies in the midair. The energy contained within these energy bodies on the 6th level was much larger than the energy on the previous few levels. How could energy that could move a 9-star Dodi be weak? Who? Xiaoyan inhaled a deep breath of air. His shoulders twisted slightly. The strength within his body also began to truly surge at this moment. It was just like a huge dragon that was slowly awakening at this moment. Xiaoyan's eyes rotated. His sharp gaze quickly locked onto a lion-like illusionary enormous beast that was suspended in midair in the middle of the hall. Although its body was similarly illusionary, this fellow was clearly much more real when compared to the other energy bodies. This also proved that the energy contained within its body was much larger. Xiaoyan had no intention of killing the goose that laid the golden eggs. Hence, he could only choose the strongest fellow. Although he would have to spend some effort, he would be able to save a lot of trouble as long as he could end the battle quickly. Xiaoyan's hands slowly clenched into fists. An enormous force swiftly agglomerated within his palms. Do Qi surged and a heavenly flame rose. It swiftly covered both of Xiaoyan's arms. The strength elephant skill was also unleashed at this moment. Ha! It is actually a heavenly flame. The appearance of the heavenly flame immediately attracted the attention of a few people in the hall. The 3 hall masters of the Northern Wasteland Hall were no exception. When the Southern Hall master saw Xiaoyan, he immediately narrowed his eyes. A doubtful expression appeared in his eyes. After pondering for a moment in his heart, he finally became silent. Soon after, the Southern Hall master slowly stood up. With heavy footsteps, he actually walked directly to the stairs that led to the 7th level. Sitting cross-legged earlier might have been a form of training for others, but to him, it was merely a way to recover his strength. What he needed to do now was to break through to the 7th level. As long as he could reach there, he might be able to use this opportunity to complete a breakthrough in his cultivation and become an origin transformation expert in one go. At the same time, Xiaoyan's body moved with a powerful pressure above his head. He charged toward the energy body at the center of the hall. Qi. Within the hall, although Xiaoyan's speed was fast, the energy body still managed to dodge in time. In this regard, Xiaoyan felt a little surprised in his heart. However, he quickly let out a cold smile. His feet violently stomped on the empty air. At the same time, his body once again charged out explosively. Mobile version update website, M. Chapter 969. Who is this brat? He is actually able to fight with the Southern Hall Chief of the Northern Wasteland Hall, to such an extent. Looking at the Southern Hall Chief's expression, it seems that he is not having a good time. That's right. The old me has been in the northern region for many years. I don't dare to say that I know all the strong people, but I can say that I know most of them. However, I have never heard of such a young strong person. Just who is this brat? Waves of surprised voices were repeatedly emitted from the crowd. Everyone's eyes were filled with shock when they looked at Xiao Yan. Being able to fight with the Southern Hall Chief of the Northern Wasteland Hall, who was a peak advanced DoD, to such an extent, was enough to show how powerful he was. Since when did such a young strong person appear in the northern region? Looks like the Northern Wasteland Hall has kicked an iron plate this time around. Being able to groom such an outstanding member of the younger generation, his clan is definitely not an ordinary faction. If the people from the Northern Wasteland Hall touch him, it is likely that they will end up creating a great enemy for themselves. The sounds of discussion were frequent and incessant. Most of the voices contained surprise, but there were even more sneers. Most of the factions did not have a good impression of the Northern Wasteland Hall. Moreover, in this northern region, it was like a pack of wolves facing a fierce tiger. A pack of hungry wolves would naturally be extremely afraid of the fierce tiger. They had always hoped that the latter would reveal a large scar. Currently, Xiao Yan's appearance was able to tear apart this scarlet scar. This was naturally something that they were happy to see. The fierce tiger might be frightening, but if a crack appeared on its body, it would attract countless flies. It was likely that it would only be a matter of time before it fell ill. Clang! With a punch, the Southern Hall Chief once again forced the Northern King back. The frightening strength violently smashed a large hole in the Northern King's chest. His entire chest had sunk in. Frightening black thunderbolts surged out. They were just like numerous poisonous snakes as they charged toward the Southern Hall Chief. This time around, the dark black thunderbolts directly surged up his arm and swiftly entered his body. They wantonly destroyed his veins. At the same time, some slight changes occurred within the Southern Hall Chief's body because of this. The South Hall Master, who was focused on the battle, did not pay much attention to this. The Bingnan hammer that he was holding in his other hand had also changed greatly at this moment. After countless strikes, a large dent had appeared on the Bingnan hammer. The entire hammer looked unusually strange. Even though the South Hall Master was unwilling to accept this, he still forcefully endured it. He was very clear about the principle of no pain, no gain. Although Bingnan hammer had been with him for a long time, he didn't know what a real weapon was until he saw the dark heavy buster sword. If he could obtain the heavy Xian ruler, his battle prowess would definitely rise to a whole new level. Once he broke through to the origin transformation realm in the future, it would undoubtedly bring him great benefits. After the Northern King was forced back, Xiao Yan's figure followed closely behind. He viciously swung the large black buster sword in his hand. Flames flew out like a banner of fire as it viciously slashed toward the South Hall Chief. The South Hall Chief swung the battered hammer. Do Qi filled the hammer as it violently blocked Xiao Yan's attack. At the same time, the remaining force forcefully forced Xiao Yan back. After forcing back Xiao Yan with a single blow, the South Hall Chief's eyes turned and looked at the Northern King. At this moment, the Northern King was the closest to the Obsidian Tower. To the South Hall Chief, this was an excellent opportunity. He wanted to force the Northern King into the Obsidian Tower, and use the power of the Obsidian Tower to crush him. That way, without the Northern King, Xiao Yan's battle prowess would be greatly reduced. At that time it would be much easier to suppress Xiao Yan. A mere 7-star Do-Di was no different from an ordinary expert as long as he did not have any puppets. He would not cause any trouble for the South Hall Chief. This time, he could easily kill Xiao Yan outside the Obsidian Tower. As for the treasures on Xiao Yan's body, they would naturally all belong to him. In the blink of an eye, the South Hall Chief's figure flickered. Like a ghost, he appeared in front of the Northern King in an instant. The battered hammer in his hand was raised high. The attack that he had long prepared was unleashed at this moment. Bingnan hammer sky-raising strike. With a low cry in his heart, the hammer fell and viciously smashed into the Northern King's body. Bang! The surrounding space instantly collapsed. The Northern King's body flew backward uncontrollably. The lightning energy once again surged and rushed into the South Hall chief's body through the hammer. At the same time, Xiao Yan, who was in the sky, once again waved his giant ruler and charged over. At this moment, he clearly saw that the Northern King's body had been directly smashed into the obsidian tower. This guy, Xiao Yan's eyes widened. He finally reacted. He did not expect the South Hall chief to use this method to deal with the Northern King. Once the Northern King was suppressed by the obsidian tower, he would lose a huge trump card. Northern King, come back, he shouted, but it was all too late. In the face of such a powerful force, the Northern King could not control his body. Even if Xiao Yan tried to control it, he could not change the outcome. As Xiao Yan's expression changed wildly, the Northern King's body was directly smashed into the obsidian tower. At this moment, the heavy doors of the obsidian tower were shut tightly. The obsidian tower was sealed. The next time it opened would be 5 years later. Hee kid, although your combat strength is not weak, it's a pity that you're still too inexperienced to fight with me. The South Hall chief laughed coldly. Seeing that the obsidian tower was completely sealed, the knot in his heart was easily resolved. The Northern King's combat strength was indeed quite a big problem for him. However, the Northern King was currently sealed in the obsidian tower. The powerful pressure would definitely crush this puppet into a pile of scrap metal. A puppet was ultimately a puppet. No matter how hard the metal was, it would still be crushed by such a powerful pressure. However, the Northern King's original body was of the ancient Void Dragon tribe. Sevenfold heaven-breaking ruler. 7 feet. A loud cry was transmitted from the empty space behind him. The South Hall chief had a cold smile on his face at this moment. He appeared unhurried as he randomly tossed aside the broken hammer in his hand. He turned his head with a smile and looked at Xiao Yan. Green-colored do qi surged out of his hand with a puff sound. It was like a flame that swiftly agglomerated into an enormous python. It carried a frightening aura and pressure. One attack and Xiao Yan's 7th ruler glow exhausted each other. The moment these two energies turned into an energy storm and dissipated, 5 dark black steel needles suddenly shot out from the energy storm. They were like 5 bolts of lightning as they ruthlessly pierced toward the South Hall chief. Even though the South Hall chief's agility was timely, he was ultimately only able to dodge the 4th and 5th steel needles. They unceremoniously penetrated the energy barrier that had formed on the surface of his body. Soon after, the needles pierced his body in front of his shocked eyes. Crack. Chapter 970. Stomp. The foot that had just been lifted a moment ago once again landed heavily on the ground. He turned his gaze and his sharp eyes shot toward the South Hall master. His eyes were dense and cold as he spoke in a deep voice. How do you know that I did it? Cuckoo, you have forgotten. Although you killed Li Su, those few low-class Dodi were only seriously injured and did not die. They had deeply imprinted your appearance in their minds. The South Hall master smiled. He appeared incomparably calm. Although he was unable to see the exact cultivation of the black-robed young man in front of him, he felt that the latter was at the very most an intermediate 9-star Dodi. Such a strength would not be able to cause any waves in front of him. I should have finished them off back then. Xiao Yan's tone was low and deep. The South Hall master laughed when he heard this. There were quite a number of people who saw your appearance back then. Don't tell me that you wanted to kill everyone in the city. May I know what you plan to do to me now? Xiao Yan's tone was icy cold. He flipped his hand and an enormous black ruler immediately landed in it. The tip of the ruler landed on the ground and left a shallow dent even on the hard floor that was created from obsidian. A strange glint involuntarily flashed across the South Hall master's eyes when he saw this scene. This obsidian tower was so hard that even with his cultivation, it was difficult to shake it. It was unexpected that the weight of this strange large ruler was actually able to leave a dent on it. This caused him to feel extremely curious. Little brat, it's not strange for you to be able to kill Li Su. However, you shouldn't have killed someone from the Northern Baron Palace. I think the obsidian tower is a good place to be buried. Today you will die here. The South Hall master's body moved the instant his voice sounded. He directly flashed and arrived in front of Xiao Yan. Do Qi agglomerated and turned into an enormous Do Qi palm above Xiao Yan's head. 6-joint body flowing ruler. 6-joint fire. The South Hall master cried out in his heart as he waved the large ruler in his hand. A dense white flame covered the large ruler. In the blink of an eye, it agglomerated into a fire barrier around Xiao Yan, protecting him within it. Boom! The gigantic energy palm descended and violently smashed against the fire barrier. Immediately, flames shot out in all directions. The energy palm was forcibly blocked, and the fire barrier was pushed back and dissipated. Xiao Yan's hand, which was tightly gripping the giant ruler, could not help but feel slightly numb. The opponent was indeed worthy of being an expert at the peak of the advanced stage Do-D class. His strength was not something that an ordinary elite Do-D could compare with. Even Xiao Yan did not have any chance of victory when fighting with him. Of course, this was under the premise that the North King was not used. Compared to Xiao Yan's surprise, the South Hall chief's heart was even more surprised at this moment. Xiao Yan's defeat was within his expectations after just one exchange. However, after the collision earlier, Xiao Yan's cultivation had been completely exposed in front of him. Advanced 7-star Do-D? You are only a 7-star Do-D. The South Hall master's face was filled with shock. The black-robed young man in front of him, who had easily entered the 6th floor of the Obsidian Tower, was actually just a 7-star Do-D. What happened? Your cultivation. Could it be that I have sensed wrongly? You have not sensed wrongly. I am indeed an advanced 7-star Do-D. Moreover, it is all thanks to that energy core. I was only able to break through by borrowing its strength. Xiao Yan grinned and clenched his numb hand. The expression on his face gradually became stern. Although the opponent was indeed a peak advanced 9-star Do-D, this was the only way to arouse the fighting spirit in his heart. What a surprising brat. I am becoming more and more curious about you. Who exactly are you? You are the first person in the northern region who dares to attack my northern desolate hall. As he spoke, the South Palace master clenched his hand. The storage ring on his finger flickered slightly. Soon after, a gigantic hammer fell into the latter's hand. Third South Hammer, the weapon that made me famous. Heavy Xian ruler. These 3 words could be considered as a reply to the other party. Good. What a good heavy Xian ruler. I will accept it on your behalf. As his voice sounded, the South Palace master's arm suddenly shook. The gigantic hammer was swung and the sound of wind immediately sounded in the hall. Soon after, a gigantic hammer shadow, wrapped in Do-Chi, violently shot toward Xiao Yan. Flame-splitting tsunami. With a low cry, the gigantic ruler in his hand was swung. The heavenly flame surged and a majestic flaming ruler glow shot out. It broke the hammer shadow that was coming toward him, and continued to smash toward the South Palace master without any reduction in strength. Third South Hammer, hammer subduing the mighty. The gigantic hammer was swung once again. It fell from high up and violently smashed onto the floor. However, it did not leave any mark. At the same time, a powerful energy wave swept out in all directions with the gigantic hammer as the center. As the hammer fell, the glow of the flame-splitting tsunami, and the energy wave scattered. This time around, Xiao Yan's flame-splitting tsunami was instantly broken. The powerful energy wave swept forward with the momentum of breaking bamboo. The remaining energy forced Xiao Yan back with a single strike. Puff! A muffled groan was emitted from his mouth. Threads of fresh blood involuntarily flowed from the corner of his mouth. The expression on Xiao Yan's face was still fiery hot. The hand that was holding the gigantic ruler tightened. The corner of Xiao Yan's mouth revealed a row of teeth that were dyed red by fresh blood. He parted his lips and laughed. Haha, not bad. It has been a long time since I met an opponent with such a powerful physical body. Again. The instant the laughter was emitted, Xiao Yan's body suddenly shot forward. He waved the gigantic ruler, and charged toward the South Palace master with brute force, without using any Do techniques. You are really a person who will not shed tears until you see the coffin. Alright, let me exercise my muscles. It has been a long time since I met a younger generation member with such a powerful physical body. The South Palace master also sneered. He waved the gigantic hammer and his body also charged forward. He violently smashed toward Xiao Yan. Clang 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 clang. The gigantic ruler was swung upward and the gigantic hammer was swung downward. The collision between the two of them was completely based on the strength of their physical bodies. Their moves were large and wide. Sparks shot in all directions when they collided. The sharp collision sound that almost caused one's ears to explode continuously resounded in this large hall, where the pressure was becoming increasingly strong. However, the two people in the hall acted as though they did not hear it. Fists and palms intersected. Elbows and shoulders collided. Every part of the body of the two of them had become the strongest weapon. The battle between the two of them became increasingly intense and fiery hot. However, the South Palace Master appeared to have a card up his sleeve from the beginning until the end. It was as though he was waiting for something. Bing Nan Hammer, sky lifting. Suddenly, the South Palace Master let out an explosive cry. His body swiftly rose into the air. The distance between Xiao Yan and him was also instantly pulled apart. Soon after, the gigantic hammer fell. Powerful Douqi gathered at one point and directly struck at Xiao Yan. Mobile version update website. Chapter 971. Bang. The sudden attack of a 9-star Dodi was something that even Xiao Yan was unable to completely block. In the end, he was forcefully sent flying by the aftershock of the enormous hammer. The heavy Xian ruler, which he had been holding tightly in his hand, also slipped out of his hand. Clang! The heavy, enormous ruler smashed onto the ground. The heavy, enormous ruler was forcefully embedded an inch deep into the ground. This obsidian tower, which was built from obsidian, was completely useless in front of the heavy Xian ruler. Xiao Yan's body rubbed against the ground as he continued to retreat. At the same time, the pressure that he could feel around him also became increasingly frightening. The muscles all over his body tightened as Douqi wildly surged. Only then did he forcefully remove the frightening force within his body. At the same time, he also resisted the frightening pressure above his head. Even though this was the case, it still caused the blood within Xiao Yan's body to churn. His expression involuntarily became much paler. He raised his eyes, only to see that the South Hall chief's eyes had landed on the heavy Xian ruler. After the repeated collisions, he had naturally sensed the extraordinariness of the heavy Xian ruler. If it was not because his Bing Nan hammer had the support of Douqi, it was likely that it would have already been deformed. The hardness of this strange large ruler could be said to be the most frightening thing that he had seen in so many years. If he could obtain such a weapon, his fighting strength would definitely be raised. The South Hall chief did not hesitate as he walked to the front of the heavy Xian ruler. He extended his hand and lifted it. A 9-star Dodi has actually been reduced to snatching a weapon from me, a 7-star Dodi. Huh? You are actually still able to stand up after receiving an attack from me. The South Hall chief's face involuntarily revealed a surprised expression when he saw Xiao Yan stand up from the ground. He immediately laughed coldly and said, "As the saying goes, the strong are respected. This ruler of yours is originally an extraordinary item. In any case, it will only be buried in your hands. Why don't you give it to me and let it shine in my hands?" The South Hall chief laughed coldly as he bent his waist. His hand was already placed on the hilt of the heavy Xian ruler. Immediately he held it in his hand and was just about to lift it. Buzz! An extremely frightening weight was suddenly transmitted from the huge ruler. The South Hall chief had used all of his strength, but he was unable to move the heavy Xian ruler even a little. The thing that caused him to be even more shocked was that the moment he held the heavy Xian ruler, he could clearly sense that the Douqi energy within his body, the vortex, and even the Douqi energy that was swiftly circulating within his chi paths had actually become sluggish in an instant. What's going on? The South Hall chief's heart was startled. He was just about to release his grip when a cold laugh suddenly sounded beside his ear. Hee, South Hall Master, it seems like you are not qualified to control it. Let me do it. The moment the cold voice fell, the South Palace Master lost control of the heavy buster sword under his hand. The handle of the buster sword left the latter's control, and in the blink of an eye, it returned to Xiao Yan's hand, who was in front of the South Palace Master. Sevenfold heaven-breaking ruler. The moment the giant ruler entered his hand, Xiao Yan executed the sevenfold sky-breaking ruler. The dense white glow from the ruler tore through the empty space and violently smashed toward the South Hall chief's face. Xiao Yan did not have the slightest pity for the latter. The sudden attack caused the South Hall chief's expression to be greatly startled. He could not be bothered about anything else as his body hurriedly dodged to the side. The ruler glow was like a rainbow as it narrowly brushed past the South Hall chief's body. The frightening aura caused the South Hall chief's heart to tremble. "Brat, you are seeking death." A humiliated fury immediately surged into the South Hall chief's heart after being forced back by a 7-star Do-D. He beckoned with his large hand, and the Bingnan hammer immediately returned to his hand. He lifted the enormous hammer, and an attack that was even more powerful than before came smashing down heavily. Sky-lifting strike. Bang. An intense explosion sounded within the large hall. A frightening energy ripple swept apart like a storm. An enormous hammer shadow shot out and shattered Xiao Yan's 3 ruler glows. Finally, the remaining strength violently sent Xiao Yan flying. Humph. With the help of the golden elephant skill and the protection of the heavenly flame, Xiao Yan did not suffer much damage. However, that powerful strength still caused the blood in his body to churn. The South Hall chief's body suddenly sank after sending Xiao Yan flying with one attack. The pressure within the large hall had become even more frightening. Immediately he ceased hesitating. His body suddenly turned and rushed toward the stairs that led to the first level without any hesitation. Now all he needed to do was guard the exit of the first level. As long as he ensured that Xiao Yan was unable to leave the Black Radiant Tower, within 3 days, he could only be sealed within and wait to be crushed to death by the frightening pressure within the Black Radiant Tower. The heavy Xian ruler was something that caused him to be extremely tempted. However, since he was unable to obtain it now, he could only wait for the next opening of the Black Radiant Tower 5 years later. Soon after, the Nan Hall chief disappeared from the 6th level. Xiao Yan, on the other hand, was still panting on the spot. The frightening pressure within the hall made it difficult for him to breathe. The recovery speed of the injuries in his body also slowed down because of this. He had to use more time to catch his breath. After nearly an hour, Xiao Yan's breathing gradually stabilized. The pressure above his head was as heavy as a mountain, causing the Do-Qi in his body to circulate at a slower speed. Xiao Yan steadied himself and put away the heavy Xian ruler. He was about to walk in the direction where the South Hall chief had left. However, just as he was about to lift his foot, he stopped. His foot stopped in midair. Xiao Yan stared at the ground in front of him, as if he was thinking about something. Suddenly, Xiao Yan abruptly turned his head. His body turned and his feet followed suit. After which, he stepped heavily on the stairs that led to the 7th level, which was just a short distance away. Since he still had the energy to spare, Xiao Yan naturally would not retreat so easily. Since he was already here, he had to try and see if he could step onto the 7th level. Buzz. As the sole of his foot landed, the heavy pressure above his head suddenly increased. At the same time, Xiao Yan's shoulder also sank slightly uncontrollably. However, he was immediately lifted up by force. Huh. A low cry was emitted from the bottom of Xiao Yan's heart. He clenched his teeth tightly and his pale face instantly became flushed red. The veins on his forehead pulsed and his body trembled slightly. Only after a couple of breaths did he slowly calm down. What a frightening pressure! The pressure on the stairs is almost twice as strong as the pressure in the hall. Xiao Yan thought deeply in his heart. His heart involuntarily felt a solemnness because of this. Even though this was the case, he still wanted to give it a try and see just where his limit was. A few minutes later, Xiao Yan slowly lifted his foot under the pressure above his head. What should have been an extremely simple action took Xiao Yan nearly 5 minutes to complete. During this process, he had endured a frightening pressure that he had never experienced before. Step. The 2nd stage. Chapter 972. Step. 7th step. When the heavy footsteps once again landed, Xiao Yan's body was still firm. He was unwilling to lower his head as he stood on the 7th step of the Obsidian Tower's 7th level. He clenched his teeth tightly, and a hissing sound was repeatedly emitted from between his teeth. Xiao Yan had used nearly 4 hours just to step onto these 7 steps. This kind of speed was naturally as slow as a tortoise from Xiao Yan's point of view. However, he had never thought about what those 9-star Do-D would think if they were to see this. This was especially so for the South Hall Master. 5 years ago, he had also stepped onto these steps. However, he had only managed to step onto the 10th step after using 2 days. It was difficult to imagine what the South Hall master would think if he were to see Xiao Yan's current speed. Most importantly, the obsidian tower was closing at this moment. The pressure within the tower had become even more frightening. It was completely incomparable to the pressure that the South Hall master had to deal with back then. This time around, Xiao Yan stood at the same spot and panted for half an hour, after which he took another step with great difficulty. His body was slightly hunched and his movements were as slow as an old man's. When Xiao Yan took another step onto the 8th step, his body suddenly sank and he nearly fell down. However, in the end he forcefully stood up with a ferocious expression. Ha! A hoarse low roar was emitted from Xiao Yan's throat. This time around his movements did not pause at all. He allowed the pressure above his head to descend. When he stepped onto the 8th step, his body suddenly bent down, and one of his hands violently pressed against the ground with a bang. Rip! Under this frightening pressure, the black robe that Xiao Yan was wearing was forcefully shattered, revealing Xiao Yan's bright red body underneath. Puff! The heavenly flame rose. The dense white flame swiftly agglomerated on the surface of Xiao Yan's body and transformed into a flame armor. With this, he once again resisted the frightening pressure above his head. Crack! However, the flaming armor could only hold on for a short while before a cracking sound suddenly rang out. What? He was shocked. He didn't expect the pressure to be so terrifying. Even the heavenly flame armor couldn't withstand it. Dark red blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. Under this frightening pressure, Xiao Yan's internal organs had also been injured. If he did not stop, it was likely that he would suffer an even more serious injury. Golden Elephant Mantra, activate. With a roar in his heart, a domineering golden light immediately condensed on the surface of Xiao Yan's body. The pressure on his body also decreased by a lot. 9. Xiao Yan's mouth panted heavily as he once again lifted his foot and landed on the 9th step. 10th Puchi. When he took the 10th step, the golden light that covered Xiao Yan's body rapidly dimmed. This time, Xiao Yan's hands landed heavily on the ground. His arms trembled violently as he forcefully supported his body. His solid muscles had become as hard as steel at this moment. His forelimbs were like pillars that supported the heavens as they forcefully supported Xiao Yan's body. However, just relying on these was clearly far from enough. In just a short moment, Xiao Yan's body began to sway even more. He appeared to be on the verge of collapsing, as though he would collapse at any moment. Little guy, can you still hold on? At this moment, Xiao Xian's solemn voice sounded in his heart. The latter could no longer hold on. If he continued to stay here, Xiao Yan would only be seriously injured by the pressure here. At that time it would really be troublesome. Xiao Xian was already prepared. Once Xiao Yan could no longer hold on, he would immediately draw a formation to temporarily resist the pressure in the obsidian tower. I can still hold on, Xiao Yan replied in his heart, unwilling to be outdone. Then he lifted his head that had been pressed down and stared at the stairs in front of him. There were still 11 steps. As long as he stepped on them, he would be able to reach the 7th floor. Ha! There was a loud shout that was like the roar of a dragon accompanied by the cry of a phoenix. At the same time, the Dragon Phoenix bloodline and the Dragon Phoenix ancient armor worked together. Xiao Yan's entire body was covered in purplish gold dragon scales. At this moment, all the power in Xiao Yan's body frantically condensed on his legs. He took a step forward, as if he had the power to support the sky. A hurricane followed him, and his speed was like a flash, disappearing in the blink of an eye. Stomp! With a single stomp he crossed 2 steps. 3 steps in a row. 4th, 5th, 21st. Xiao Yan roared in his heart as his foot landed. Although his face appeared ferocious, it also contained some fanaticism. Both of his eyes were scarlet as he stared intently at the 21st step. His foot was finally about to step onto the 21st step. At the same time, it was also the 7th step, a place that only origin transformation experts could step into. The 7th floor. Wang. However, just as Xiao Yan's foot landed on the 7th floor, a terrifying pressure suddenly rushed out from the 7th floor. It was like the Yellow River had burst through a dam, whistling past. Xiao Yan's body was violently struck by this powerful pressure. He was sent flying with a single strike. After spending nearly 6 hours, Xiao Yan had returned to his original position in an instant. Puchi. His body heavily crashed into the ground, and a large mouthful of blood spurted out from his mouth, splattering everywhere. With just a single strike, Xiao Yan was almost heavily injured. It was easy to imagine how terrifying the pressure on the 7th floor was. Puffed! Xiao Yan flipped his body and spat out a large mouthful of fresh blood. His flushed red face instantly lost its color, and his entire aura became sluggish. Little guy, you were too impulsive this time. Even a normal origin transformation expert wouldn't have the ability to charge into the 7th floor. You actually... Cough cough, ancestor. There is no need to worry. I only want to know where my limit is. Although I haven't truly ascended, I can be considered to know now. Hearing Xiao Xian's words, Xiao Yan parted his mouth and smiled. His face was unconcerned, and there was even a trace of excitement in his eyes. His actions earlier might have been crazy, but he had done something that even a 9-star Do-D could not do. On the 21st step, which was the 7th floor of the obsidian tower, there was a small footprint that was stained with some blood. With a flip of his hand, a few Tier 4 medicinal pills immediately appeared in his hand. These medicinal pills were precious on the outside, but they were just like jelly beans in his hand. Xiao Yan swallowed them without cherishing them. Immediately, the dense medicinal strength rapidly turned into a warm current that spread throughout his body. His originally serious injuries rapidly healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. Although the injuries he had suffered this time were not light, it was nothing out of the ordinary for Xiao Yan. He had long since become accustomed to it. Borrowing the medicinal strength in his body, Xiao Yan recovered from his injuries while retreating to the 1st floor. As the pressure within the tower increased, Xiao Yan was unable to continue staying on the 6th floor in addition to the injuries in his body. Although his body was still heavy, Xiao Yan's movements were undoubtedly much lighter than before. It was as if the shackles on his body had been removed. Unknowingly, Xiao Yan's speed had increased a little. However, due to the current situation, he did not notice this. A short moment later, Xiao Yan had already appeared in front of the stairs to the 1st floor. From here, he could see the South Hall Master sitting outside the obsidian tower. The latter seemed to be waiting for him. When Xiao Yan appeared, their gazes met from a distance. Dopa Reincarnated Flame Emperor. Chapter 973. Currently, there were still 2 days before the closing of the obsidian tower. The purpose of the South Hall Chief was to prevent Xiao Yan from walking out of the obsidian tower. At this moment, the distance between the two of them was less than 100 steps. However, it was this distance of 100 steps that would determine Xiao Yan's life and death. The South Hall Chief wanted to rely on the strength of the obsidian tower to suppress Xiao Yan until he died. In this way, not only would he be able to save a lot of effort, but he would also be able to complete the mission that the Hall Chief had given him. He would also have the opportunity to obtain everything that Xiao Yan currently possessed. The South Hall Chief would naturally not easily let go of such a good thing. It was quite a coincidence. If it was not because the crime that Xiao Yan had committed happened to be within his jurisdiction, it was likely that the latter's appearance would have swiftly spread throughout the entire northern wasteland. At that time, it would be unknown just whose hands these treasures would land in. From his point of view, although Xiao Yan's fighting strength was extraordinary, a 7-star Do-D was ultimately a 7-star Do-D. Regardless of how Xiao Yan resisted, it was impossible for Xiao Yan to be a match for him. With Xiao Yan's current fighting strength, he was already comparable to an intermediate-level expert among the 9-star Do-D. It must be said that this kind of fighting strength that surpassed one's level could already be considered extremely frightening. However, there was still a great gap in front of an expert at the peak of the advanced level Do-D class. Brat, weren't you very fierce earlier? Why have you ended up in such a state now? You have actually been injured by the pressure within the tower until this state. The corner of the South Hall Chief's mouth was lifted into a cold smile. Regardless of how strong one's fighting strength was, one's cultivation was ultimately unable to keep up. Under the frightening pressure within the tower, it was unavoidable for one to suffer some injuries. In this way, he was even more confident in being able to keep Xiao Yan here. However, when he said this, he had forgotten about the embarrassing situation he had been in the tower. Ha! Hearing the South Hall chief's mocking laughter, Xiaoyan laughed mockingly. If he did not want to ascend the stairs to the 7th level, what could the pressure within the tower do to him? South Hall Master, are you waiting for me here because I haven't beaten you enough? Xiaoyan coldly smiled. His pale white face gradually recovered its sleek redness under the effect of the medicinal pill. The remaining dou qi within his body slowly began to circulate. Although his condition was not at his peak, there was nothing for him to be afraid of when facing the Southern Hall chief. That's right. I want to see how many more surprises you can bring me. The South Hall Master smirked, his face cold and unfeeling. Surprise? Hee, I'm afraid that you'll turn the surprise into a shock. Xiaoyan sneered. As long as his opponent was not an origin transformation expert, he did not fear them at all. With the Northern King present and the 10 steel needles that he had condensed from the power of the Way, he felt a little more confident. Sharp-tongued brat. Since you want to die, I'd like to see just how you'll leave this place. With a cold cry, the South Hall Master waved his hand, and the Bingnan hammer appeared in his hand. He swung the hammer and smashed it into the ground in front of him. A violent explosion shook the entire city as a terrifying wave of energy swept out. In the blink of an eye, the entire square had been reduced to ruins. On the other hand, the obsidian tower in front of him remained unmoved. Xiaoyan sat on the ground expressionlessly within the tower. He allowed the pressure above him to grow stronger and stronger. Instead, he closed his eyes and began to focus on refining the medicinal pill in his body. Surprise involuntarily flashed across the face of the South Hall chief when he saw this scene. Currently, the pressure within the Black Bright Tower was becoming increasingly powerful. An ordinary elite Dodi would not be able to endure for even a moment within it. Even a high-class Dodi would not be able to endure for long. Xiaoyan was clearly injured at this moment. He knew that the obsidian tower was about to close, yet he still wanted to stay inside. Was he not seeking death? This brat, what exactly is he trying to do? The South Hall Master could not help but mutter to himself. He did not think that Xiaoyan was a foolish person. Was it possible for a fool to be able to raise his cultivation to such an extent at such a young age, and possess a frightening fighting strength that surpassed an ordinary person? It was obviously impossible. However, the South Hall Master felt somewhat helpless in the current situation. The pressure within the tower was continuously increasing. Once he entered, his cultivation would definitely be suppressed. At that time, anything could happen. If Xiaoyan was prepared, he would have fallen into a trap. Rather than that, it was better to wait patiently outside the tower. In short, as long as he could block the entrance of the obsidian tower, Xiaoyan would not be able to leave the obsidian tower no matter what tricks he had up his sleeves. Time slowly flowed by as both parties waited. In the blink of an eye, half a day had passed. At this moment, the medicinal pills within Xiaoyan's body had been completely refined. His originally pale face once again recovered a sleek redness. The breath in his nose had also gradually calmed down. His entire condition had also recovered by more than half. At the same time, the pressure above Xiaoyan's head became even more terrifying. Unafraid of the powerful pressure above his head, Xiaoyan's face remained calm. The corners of his mouth curled into a slight smile. His pitch-black eyes were slightly raised. His eyes were as deep as a well, giving off an unfathomable and sinister aura. Standing up, he did not stop his anti-inflammatory actions. With steady footsteps, he walked toward the exit of the obsidian tower. At the same time, the expression on the South Palace Master's face turned cold. The hand holding the giant hammer tightened slightly. Dou Qi surged up and entered the hammer. Brat, are you prepared to die? The South Hall Master's voice was cold as ice. You want to stop me here? It's a pity that you are not an origin transformation expert. Xiaoyan smiled. His footsteps became even heavier. At this moment, the pressure within the tower had become a little stronger within a short couple of breaths. If he were to continue staying here, it was likely that even Xiaoyan would not be able to leave this place. Oh, you mean to say that only origin transformation experts can stop you? Heh. Not knowing whether to laugh or not, Xiaoyan's body swiftly approached the exit. What a boastful brat. Do you really think that no one can do anything to you just because you have some ability? Get out of here. The South Hall Master coldly shouted. At the same time, Xiao Yan's figure had already appeared in front of the obsidian tower. He was only one step away from stepping out of the obsidian tower. The giant hammer was swung from top to bottom, viciously smashing down on Xiao Yan's head. At the same time that the giant hammer fell, the sharp sound of wind breaking continuously sounded. The sound of the sonic boom was endless, almost causing one's eardrums to burst. A powerful Do-Chi energy emerged from the huge hammer, and a frightening, imposing manner swept out in all directions. The color of the sky changed, and the wind and clouds swept out. The entire city had already attracted the attention of the people here. Many people's expressions changed at this moment. Any Do-Di could feel the heaven-shaking killing intent contained in that aura. They felt fear from the bottom of their hearts toward the latter's strength. What caused them to feel even more surprised and curious was just who exactly was this person that could cause a peak late-stage Do-Di expert to face him in such a manner. However, the expression on Xiao Yan's face was calm in the face of the South Hall Master's attack, that was filled with strength. His calm manner appeared extremely strange. The wind pressure that came from the front caused the black robe he was wearing to tightly stick to the surface of his body. The expression on Xiao Yan's face did not change. Both of his eyes were still wide open as he stared intently at the giant hammer in front of him that was already within reach. Suddenly Xiao Yan smiled. The expression in his dark black eyes suddenly became stern. At the same time, a light flashed across the storage ring on his finger in a lightning-like manner. Almost at the same time, the Northern King, whose body was emitting a purple-gold glow like a metal tower, suddenly appeared in front of Xiao Yan. The Northern King arched his body backward. Soon after, he violently swung his fist forward to meet the Bingnan hammer that was filled with an overbearing strength. Bang! When the attack landed, a frightening buzzing sound reverberated throughout the sky above Feng City. Everyone's body involuntarily trembled. Numerous gazes that were filled with shock were thrown over. Everyone's faces were filled with shock. Very quickly, the crowd surged over. Countless gazes were like spotlights as they stared at the South Hall Master, who was currently standing in front of the Obsidian Tower Gate, and the Northern King, who was blocking the Bingnan hammer with a single punch. That is, the South Hall Master of the Northern Desolate Hall. That is a 9-star Do-Di. Not only is he a 9-star Do-Di, but he is also a peak late-stage Do-Di. It is said that he has come to the Obsidian Tower this time around for the 7th floor. I wonder if he has managed to reach it. The 7th floor. TSK, that is a place that only origin transformation experts can reach. It has been so many years, but no one has been able to reach the 7th floor. It is really unexpected. But who is that fellow who is currently exchanging blows with the South Hall Master? To be able to block the South Hall Master's hammer, I'm afraid that he is at least a peak late-stage Do-Di. Another peak advanced 9-star Do-Di expert. Hey, there will be a good show to watch now. The Northern Desolate Hall has dominated the entire Northern Desolate region for a long time. Many factions do not like them. If it was not because... Shut up. Be careful that a loose tongue causes trouble. Is the Northern Desolate Hall something that you can casually discuss? The surrounding crowd immediately became chaotic when they saw the scene in the arena. Their discussions were filled with surprise at the Northern King. This is a puppet. At this moment, the South Hall Master, who was the main character in everyone's discussion, undoubtedly understood the situation he was currently facing. The fellow who was currently exchanging blows with him was actually a humanoid puppet that did not have any aura. Its eyes were empty. Puppet? How can it be a puppet? If it is a puppet, how can it use the strength of lightning? The South Hall Master was extremely shocked. If the North King was just an ordinary puppet, it would not have been a big deal. However, what surprised him was that when the North King collided with the North King, an extremely powerful thunderbolt energy erupted from the North King's body. The thunderbolt energy was of great help to the North King in being able to block his hammer attack. Buzz. At this moment, the sound of wind suddenly swept past the South Hall Master's ear. Soon after, a black figure quietly appeared beside him like a ghost. How can this brat speed? The South Hall Master was instantly shocked. However, he did not dare to be careless in the face of Xiao Yan's attack. Relying on his familiarity with the giant hammer in his hand, the South Hall master pulled his hand violently. The giant hammer was immediately pulled in front of him and forcefully blocked Xiao Yan's attack. Following which, the South Hall master's figure quickly retreated. Soon he appeared at the edge of the arena. In response, Xiao Yan did not follow up with another attack. Instead, Li Sheng stood in front of the obsidian tower and cautiously scanned the crowd. Finally, he secretly heaved a sigh of relief when he did not discover the East Hall master and the West Hall master. The reason why he had waited for half a day was partly because he wanted to recover from the injuries within his body. The main reason was to avoid the presence of the East Hall master and the West Hall master. Although the relationship between these three parties did not appear to be harmonious, they ultimately belonged to the same faction. At the end of the day, they were all in the same group. Once he and the South Hall master started a big fight, their presence would definitely cause Xiao Yan a lot of trouble. After confirming that they had indeed left, Xiao Yan's heart naturally became much more relaxed. If he only needed to face the South Hall master alone, it would not be too difficult for him. Just the Northern King alone would be able to hold him back. There was no need to mention his frightening speed, which surpassed that of a 9-star Dodi. So this is the case. The reason why you did not attack earlier was because you were waiting for the two of them to leave. The South Hall master only came to a sudden understanding in his heart after noticing Xiao Yan's gaze. He curled his mouth. He was not concerned about this. If those two fellows were around, they would only become hungry wolves that would fight for his benefits. However, I am more curious. Why is this puppet of yours able to control the lightning strength? How can that kind of natural strength be used on an inanimate object? Xiao Yan shrugged his shoulders in an uncertain manner when he heard this. Honestly speaking, even he did not understand what was going on. However, this was no longer important to him. What was important was that he was able to control this strength. Xiao Yan nodded. No matter how strong the power of the thunderbolt was, as long as the North King was in his hands, everything would naturally fall under his control. The South Hall master narrowed his eyes when he saw the expression on Xiao Yan's face. His pair of hair would occasionally size up the Northern King. Other than fear, there was also greed in his eyes. A 9-star Dodi class puppet. If he could obtain it, in addition to the puppet that Xiao Yan possessed, it was likely that the person in charge of the Northern Desolate Hall would change hands. Of course, he could only quietly think about this in his heart. After all, before he possessed that strength, it was impossible for him to shake that fellow's position. However, at this moment, Xiao Yan in front of him had become another large obstacle in his heart. Chapter 974. Clang. The giant hammer and the huge black ruler collided fiercely, causing sparks to fly in all directions. The invisible void began to ripple intensely, and the sonic boom shook people's eardrums. The plaza below was already in ruins, and because of the shocking collision, it was lifted up layer by layer. In just a short moment, the originally huge plaza had turned into a huge crater. Only in the center of the crater, the obsidian tower still stood motionless, as if it was not affected by the battle at all. A frightening energy violently erupted when the hammer and ruler collided with each other. An explosion sounded and energy swept out. The two figures were sent flying back by each other. Each of them stood at the edge of the open ground. Xiao Yan's hand, which was holding the huge ruler, could not help but tremble. The muscles on his face could not help but twitch. What terrifying strength! His opponent was a peak late-stage 9-star Dodi after all. His strength was only second to an origin transformation expert. This kind of strength was truly shocking. If it were not for his great physical body, he would not have been able to last so long against his opponent. While Xiao Yan was quietly feeling surprised in his heart, the Southern Hall chief was also feeling surprised in his heart. This brat, no matter how I look at him, he's just a fledgling brat. How could his cultivation and physical strength be so powerful? If it wasn't for the fact that I started cultivating 100 years earlier than him, I'm afraid. Even the South Palace master did not dare to think too much about it. The latter's cultivation and talent could be said to be the most terrifying person he had ever seen in his life. Given enough time, even that person would not be a match for him. Fortunately, With Xiao Yan's current cultivation, it was impossible for Xiao Yan to rely on his own strength to fight him to a draw. This coincidentally gave him an opportunity. Unfortunately, although Xiao Yan's cultivation was far inferior to his, Xiao Yan still had the powerful North King. With the North King's strength as a late-stage 9-star Do-D, Xiao Yan had nothing to fear as long as his opponent was not an origin transformation expert. The South Hall Master had also discovered the strangeness of the North King. Although he was powerful, he was still helpless against the North King. The North King's body was made of steel, and he was not afraid of any pain. Even he had to be wary of his terrifying strength. That was especially true of the strange lightning energy in the North King's body. Even he felt pain from it. Once he was struck by the lightning, even with his cultivation he would inevitably suffer some injuries, not to mention Xiao Yan. Once both of them were present, he was destined to be unable to kill Xiao Yan. At this moment, both sides stood opposite each other. They were not in a hurry to attack, and the atmosphere became strange. In this state, even those outside of the battle circle held their breaths, waiting for the arrival of a storm. The South Hall Master glanced around, trying to think of a way to deal with this situation. Suddenly, his eyes turned and couldn't help but fall on the towering obsidian tower that stood in the middle of the huge pit. As the closing time of the obsidian tower grew closer and closer, the pressure within the tower had reached an extremely terrifying level. Even he might not be able to withstand such pressure. Thinking of this, the South Hall Master's eyes flickered. Perhaps this is a good choice. As a bright light flashed across his eyes, the South Hall Master suddenly had an idea. He lifted his eyes and looked directly at Xiao Yan. This time, the South Hall Master's solemn face curled into a cold smile. "Humph, kid. Although your combat strength is not weak, I'm afraid you're too naive if you want to fight me to a draw." As soon as he finished speaking, the South Hall Master's body suddenly shot out at lightning speed. In the blink of an eye, he was already in front of Xiao Yan. He waved his giant hammer and smashed it heavily on Xiao Yan's head. Xiao Yan's eyes turned cold. At the same time that his spiritual strength spread out, the heavy Xian ruler in his hand danced. A dense white flame wrapped around the enormous ruler. From bottom to top, it violently collided with the enormous hammer that was heading toward him. Clang! With a loud sound, a terrifying force poured down and the giant Buster sword fell. The South Hall Master sneered. His body shook, and a terrifying force poured out again. Clang! At this moment, the North King, who was beside Xiao Yan, suddenly attacked. His fist violently smashed against the giant hammer. The powerful force actually left an inch-deep fist mark on the giant hammer. At the same time, a dark black lightning force swept out like a giant python. It moved along the North King's arm and violently collided with the Bingnan hammer. Boom! The two enormous forces poured out at the same time. In addition to Xiao Yan's own strength, they actually forced the South Hall Master back. The South Hall Master's feet stepped back in the empty space. After 100 steps, his body finally shook. Powerful Do Qi poured out and forcefully removed the enormous force in his body. Damn it! Seeing the faint fist mark on the Bingnan hammer, the South Hall Master could not help but curse. A piercingly cold murderous intent surged onto his face. "Kid, if you have the ability, use your own strength to fight with me. Relying on a puppet and using unorthodox methods. What kind of ability is that?" The South Hall Master clenched his fist so tightly that it emitted cracking sounds. His veins bulged, and his surging Do Qi surged on the surface of his body, revealing the anger in his heart. Xiao Yan curled his mouth and laughed coldly when he heard this. He coldly cried out. He coldly said, "What do you mean by unorthodox methods? All I know is that as long as it is a force that can be controlled, it is the right way." After he shouted, Xiao Yan waved his large hand and pointed his finger at the South Hall Master. The North King seemed to have received an order. His body instantly shot out like a cannonball. It cut through the air and headed straight for the South Hall Master. Humph! The South Hall Master let out a low chuckle. With a thought, a majestic Do Qi surged into the giant hammer. Soon after, it collided with the North King. With the South Hall Master's cultivation, he might not be able to destroy the North King. However, if he used all his strength, he could guarantee that the North King would not be able to get close to him. He could even easily suppress the North King. Unfortunately, he was still unable to resist the annoying lightning energy. At this moment, Xiaoyan had also taken a moment to catch his breath. His body flashed and once again joined the battle. The battle, which had originally been suppressed by the South Hall Master, stabilized with the addition of Xiaoyan. Intense collisions sounded in the sky. The giant hammer smashed down, and the black ruler danced. The North King, who was like a metal tower, also swung his fist. Doqi shot out and lightning surged. The battle quickly became intense. Gradually, it entered a white-hot stage. Under the deliberate guidance of the South Hall Master, the three of them were unknowingly getting closer to the obsidian tower.